Hello, and welcome to Dr. A for Animals, the podcast that gives you reliable answers to your questions about animal health and wellness and useful tools to help you help animals, whether in your own home or out in the wild. Together with expert guests, I'll give you information that is based on scientific research and clinical experience. I'm Dr. Charla Ansorge, a small animal and exotics veterinarian, and I'm so happy to share my love of animals with you. Let's get started. Welcome to episode 2 of Dr. A for Animals. Today we're going to be talking about one of my very favorite subjects, the cat, nature's most perfect creature. Yep, I said it. You heard it from a professional. Cats are the best. Cats rule. And we're going to talk all about them today. It's going to be great. So whether you have a cat or you're interested in cats, you want to know a little bit more about them, whether you have 8 cats, hopefully there's a little bit of something for everyone here today. We're going to start with talking about bringing a new cat home. So if you already have kitties and you're not planning to get a new one anytime soon, just check out the timestamps in the show notes, and you can skip through that very first part if you don't want to go through that, but it'll always be there for you later if you're getting a new kitty. And then we're going to move on and talk about keeping kitties indoors versus letting them outdoors. We're going to go over some general feline health monitoring and maintenance at home, and we're going to talk about some basic cat behavior. So let's get started. Let's talk about bringing a new kitty home, a kitten or an adult cat. Before you take the step of going and picking out that cat, think about your time and energy at home that you have to commit to caring for a kitty cat. And if you're going to be introducing a new cat to a household where you already have cats present, think about both cats' temperaments, activity levels. Think about how compatible they're maybe going to be and be prepared for introductions. So, for instance, if you have an 18-year-old rickety, creaky elder kitty and you want to get some new kittens, well, that's maybe not the greatest idea. Some really super active kittens that don't have manners and don't know how to behave around another cat and might bowl over your rickety old kitty might not be such a great situation. So think about trying to match up temperaments at least a little bit. It can be hard with a cat that you don't know yet what their personality is really like, because cats can be a bit shy at first. But get as much information as you can about the cat that you are thinking about bringing home, both for your lifestyle and also if you do have other cats or dogs for their lifestyle. And also you want to try to make sure, if you're going to be mixing species, that perhaps both parties involved have had some exposure to that other species. So if you have a dog already, you want to know that that dog is pretty comfortable with cats. And if you're bringing home a new cat, ideal to know that that cat is somewhat comfortable with dogs, or you're getting kittens that you can teach to be comfortable with dogs. So cats do like to choose their own social groups. So when we choose for them, it doesn't always work out. So it is important to be prepared for making slow introductions and not get your heart set on kitties getting along with new kitties or dogs or other animals in the house, because sometimes it doesn't work that way. So be ready and, let the cats choose for themselves. And as long as they're happy and they're tolerant of each other, well, that's good. But we'll talk a bit more about introductions a little bit later. So the next thing you want to consider if you're getting a new cat, should you get 1? Should you get 2? Maybe 3? If you are interested in getting multiples, litter mates are great if you can. And, if you're getting kittens, oftentimes there's more than one kitten available, and they can really keep each other company and keep each other busy and take a little bit of the pressure off of you for keeping them constantly entertained, because kittens are very high energy. So if you are not up for having your toes bitten in the middle of the night and having to keep busy with playtime many, many times a day and having rambunctious little monkeys running around your house, you might not want to get tiny kittens, even though they are the most adorable creatures of all time. There's just nothing better in the world than kittens. They're feisty and they're silly, and they'll save you money on therapy. Anyway, sometimes if you're adopting an adult cat from a shelter or something like that, you might come across a bonded pair. It's it is great to be able to keep animals together that have grown up together or that have been in a social group together and already have a bond to each other. So they also will keep each other company when you're not home. They can be great playmates and keep each other exercising. So it is nice to have multiple cats. We'll talk more about cat behavior later, but cats are known as solitary hunters. This doesn't mean that they are solitary animals. They do like to have a lot of time to themselves, but they also can be quite gregarious. And we do see cats that are, out in the wild, feral kitties, that will tend to congregate in groups. So they do like to have other cats around, but there are some parameters around that to make sure that all of those cats are happy in that social situation. So adopting more than one cat at a time is totally fine and often is a good idea. If you're up for adopting a senior cat from a shelter, you are wonderful, and I appreciate you. Senior kitties tend to have a much harder time finding a home because a lot of people don't want to take a senior cat home that may not live for that long or that may have health issues and need medications and costly vet visits and things like that. Hopefully, any cat that you bring home will eventually be a senior and probably will have all those issues. But for senior cats in a shelter, the stress can be tricky, can be much harder on them. Immune systems are not as robust as we age. So senior and geriatric kitties that are in a shelter situation or in, foster homes where they may not stay for that long, that is tough on them. So getting them out of shelters and into forever homes as soon as possible is ideal. So if you have it in you to adopt a senior pet, it is a wonderful, wonderful thing to do. So let's talk about temperament a little. We did a little bit already with talking about kittens and that sort of thing. Younger cats are going to tend to have a very high energy level. Cats do need a lot of exercise and a lot of interaction. So if you're looking for a lap cat, you want to make sure that you're looking at a cat that may be a lap cat and not a crazy rambunctious, I need to run around the house at 3:00 in the morning every morning kind of a cat. Also look at how social they are, if they're very shy. If you're somewhat new to cats, you probably don't want to go for a kitty who's very shy or poorly socialized, or a kitty with special needs who may need daily medication. If you're not used to doing that, it's not a great way to be introduced to living with a cat. So certainly if it's your first time bringing a cat home, I would try to go for a relatively young, either a kitten, which is super fun, or a young adult cat who is otherwise just generally healthy and isn't going to need a whole lot of hands-on, medicating or anything like that, or coaxing to be social. Working with a very shy kitty is best done if you've already had quite a bit of experience with cats. If you are more experienced and you're going to be adopting a very shy cat who hasn't been very well socialized, make sure that you're taking extra care to offer safe little hiding spots, easy access to resources in a sort of confined area initially so that they don't have to come out into the house. They don't have to walk across the house to get between their quiet little safe space and food and water in the litter box. Make sure that they have kind of a small area where everything's accessible. They don't have to move around too much initially, and plan to be very patient, very slow with socializing them and introducing them to their new home. Give lots of positive reinforcement. And by positive reinforcement, I mean giving rewards when they're doing stuff that you want them to keep doing. So if they're coming out and investigating the environment a little bit, or they're sniffing your hand, or they're letting you pet them, make sure that you're giving some nice reward like a tasty treat or something like that. And make sure that your home is going to be a quiet environment if you're adopting a kitty like that. Cats can be very reactive to noise. And if you have a cat who is particularly shy or easily startled, if you've got young kids that are going to be running around and super active and making a lot of noise, or you have really noisy neighbors, or you like to listen to death metal super loud, that's not a good cat to bring home to that kind of home. You want to bring a young, rambunctious, crazy kitty into a more young, rambunctious kind of home. So try to match up the kitty with the home environment. Cats can be very emotional creatures, and it can be hard to get them relaxed and feeling safe in an environment that's very alien to them or that's very noisy and very active. So if you're interested in breeds, then you'll want to think about the breed of cat that you want. If you're just kind of going for your basic domestic short-haired cat, that is the most common kind of cat around, and they are awesome. So definitely get one. But if you're interested in a specific breed, you'll want to think about whether that breed is a good choice again for your lifestyle in your home, and you'll need to decide on whether you want to try to find one for adoption or whether you're going to buy from a breeder. Of course, since I have been a shelter vet, I am very pro-adoption, but I know that there are some cases where you just really, really, really want a Maine Coon or some other really cool breed of cat, and you're probably going to be working with a breeder, although there are rescues that do specialize in certain breeds, and sometimes they will show up in shelters. We certainly had Maine Coons and Siamese cats and various other fun breeds of cats in the shelter that I worked at. So be sure to learn about any kind of breed-specific needs, potential hereditary diseases, and that kind of thing. So if you're adopting a brachycephalic breed of kitty, so that's a cat that has a little short nose like a Persian cat, you want to be ready for managing their eyes and nose and skin around their face. So brachycephalic animals can have a lot of problems with nasal discharge, eye discharge, moisture in the skin folds and that sort of thing. So you want to make sure that you're ready to handle that, as well as their super fluffy coat. If you're getting a long-haired cat, you're going to need to do a lot of brushing and make sure that they're not getting matted and that sort of thing. We have bred cats to have a type of fur and a length of coat that they didn't really evolve to take care of. So they are beautiful and fancy, but they need a little bit of extra help taking care of a coat like that. So be sure that if you're going to be getting a big fluffy Maine Coon or a ragdoll or somebody like that, that you are ready to be brushing that cat at least several times a week, and that you're going to keep them free from mats, because mats are not just funky, they're very uncomfortable for the cat. It's a big knotted mess of hair that pulls on their skin, and it can actually cause a lot of irritation in the skin. So make sure that you're ready to take care of that. Kitties that have little short folded ears can be a little bit more prone to getting ear infections. So, being ready for that kind of thing. So just make sure that you research your breed. And there are various cat breed associations on the internet that you can do a little bit of search for. You can get some general information about breeds. You can also talk to your vet, of course. And if you're adopting, or if you're purchasing from a breeder, oftentimes a breeder will have some medical records, but definitely if you're adopting, get any medical records that you can. So if this was a stray kitty that showed up at the shelter, all they're going to have is the shelter records, which, depending on the type of shelter and how extensive their medical workup is, it might not be a lot. It might be they got vaccines and spayed and neutered. So that might be all you have. But if there are any other records, if you're adopting an animal from another family that needs to rehome, make sure you get as much background information as you can. Now, sometimes a cat will find you. So if you find a stray kitty who starts coming around your home and you bond with them and you are really kind of falling in love with this cat, which, I don't know how you couldn't, because they're cats, always try to find an original owner. So always keep in mind that kitty may have gotten lost, may have gotten startled and scared, and isn't supposed to be out in the world and just doesn't know how to find their way home, and someone may be missing them. I have had a few kitties come in that somebody's been feeding and taking care of and finally let in their house, and it's been several months, and they've bonded with this cat, and now they're taking them in for their first vet visit. And we are obligated at the vet to scan for a microchip, and sometimes we find one. And then the person who's bringing in the kitty can be really freaked out and kind of heartbroken, because they've now bonded with this cat and decided to commit to this cat. And it may turn out that there actually is an owner to the cat who has been really missing the kitty. And we need to keep that in mind. So if you do find a stray kitty and you don't think that they're, a neighbor cat that's just coming into your yard, you can post on Nextdoor, Facebook, other social media like that. If they still keep coming around your house, or if they look like they're not in that great shape, you can check in with local rescues, SPCA, Humane Society. If they don't have any info, they don't have a cat, a lost cat posted that meets this description or anything, You may be able to take them there for a microchip scan. If not, you can take them to most vets. You can make an appointment and come in and just have a quick check for a microchip. And then if they find a chip, the hospital or the rescue can try to reach out to a registered owner if there is one on the chip. Sometimes there's not. If the animal was chipped at a rescue and then released, they may, or if they were adopted and the adopter never updated the contact information, the chip might not be registered to an individual, in which case that's your cat now. And it certainly has happened that I've had kitties come in and it turns out they were microchipped and we tried to reach the person that they were registered to, and we don't ever get a response. And in that case, depending on the state, after a certain period of time passes, that cat is considered legally abandoned, and then you become the legal owner. So that's kind of how that works. We just want to make sure that we are doing our due diligence in trying to find an original owner, because I know earlier in my life, I had lost some kitties, and it was utterly devastating to me. And if anyone had ever found one of my cats and returned them to me, I would have been absolutely elated. So be sure that you're looking to make sure there isn't a loved one already attached to that kitty cat. But if there's not, and that kitty now is yours, then we'll talk a little more about introducing that cat into your household. But first, I do want to also say, when you're planning for a new cat, be sure that you're preparing financially for supplies, food, medical costs. Plan your first vet visit so that you can make sure you get that kitty checked out and that you can be planning for their future as thoroughly as possible. And then the fun part is shopping for your cat. This is exciting. So you want to get a nice carrier. And I'll tell you a little bit about carriers. These days, there are some really nice carrier designs, and there are some really crazy, weird ones. I recommend, in general, a hard-sided carrier that has a clip-off top. So not screws, but these cool clips that are very sturdy but can be popped open easily that allow you to take the entire top of the carrier off. Without having to open the door and pull the cat out of the carrier if you want to try to get them out. So like when you go to the vet, you can pop the top off and leave the kitty in the bottom of the carrier. We can actually do a lot of their exam just in the carrier so they don't have to be taken out. And then we can just lay the top back on so they can feel very cozy and secure in their carrier that smells like home. Don't get one of those old carriers that screws on, because those are a real pain. If we have to unscrew every single screw to get your kitty out without stressing them out, it just takes more time and we can lose screws and it's just kind of a pain. Sometimes they get rusted and they won't come out. So try to get the type that has a clip or like a clip and slide type of opening. Now there are soft-sided carriers as well, and some people really like those because they're a little more squishy. If you get one of those, make sure that it's sturdy enough that it doesn't sink down on top of the cat. I've seen some come in where they're basically like a gym bag and they're just sort of the sides and top are bowed in and kind of on the cat. That's not great for the cat. We want them to have good air circulation and be able to move around in the carrier. So make sure that it's cozy for them, but spacious enough that they can sit up if they want to and they can turn around easily, and that the carrier is not like pressing on them. So if you do get a soft-sided one, make sure it has really nice sturdy corners, and some of them do, and make sure that it zips from the top and not just from the front. So that's Carriers 101. Okay. Then you're going to need to get some good quality kitty food. There are so many different types of cat food out there, and we will do an episode on nutrition in the future. So I won't go into too much detail here, but I will say kind of the top 3 recommendations from most vets are going to be Purina, especially the Pro Plan line of food, Hills or Science Diet, and Royal Canin. Also, I would probably throw IAMS and Tiki Cat in there are good high quality diets. That doesn't mean that other diets out there are not high quality, but Purina, Hills, and Royal Canin are the companies that do the bulk of nutrition research in dogs and cats. So their diets are made based on very well qualified nutrition standards, and they do have very, very good quality control. So in general, as veterinarians, we tend to trust those brands a lot. It's not because we're getting nice financial kickbacks from these companies. I promise you, we are not. Most of us do get a little bit of a discount, like 15% on our food, which is really nice, but they're not buying us cars or anything. They're taking us out to super fancy holidays or anything like that. So I don't think that is why we tend to recommend those foods. It really is because they're doing a ton of nutrition research and they do make very high quality diets. So if you're not sure where to start, I would start with Science Diet, Royal Canin, or Purina. And then you're going to get some dishes for your kitty. Make sure that you get a few sets of dishes so that you can change them out regularly and you can be washing dishes regularly. You're going to need a litter box. You're going to need a scoop. You're going to need litter. All the things that go along with that. You might want like a bath mat or a little, they make these little mats that have kind of holes in them for your cat to walk across on the way out of the litter box just to wipe litter off their feet. As far as litter type, most cats do prefer a clay-based clumping litter that is not scented. There are a lot of scented litters out there. It actually can be kind of hard to go to the store and find the unscented one, but you really want the unscented one that has activated charcoal in it that actually has the best odor control, and that's the one that cats tend to prefer. There are a few different varieties of litter out there that are made from like wheat or corn. There's one that's made from grass that I do find is pretty good. Some of the others, they don't clump as well, or they have a really odd odor to the cat. It depends on the cat. You certainly can try whatever you want, but if you have a cat that's going outside of the litter box and you're not using a clay-based clumping litter, that's one of the first things I would do aside from going to the vet to make sure that there's not a urinary tract problem. But I probably would start out with a clay-based clumping litter just to be on the safe side because that is what most cats tend to do best with. You want to make sure that you're scooping that litter box daily, and I'll talk a little bit more about that further on. You will need a scratching post, unless your kitty comes already declawed. Hopefully not, because we do see a lot of secondary problems in declawed kitties. But if your kitty has claws, which most of them do and should, you want to get a nice sturdy scratching post. You want one that's pretty tall and pretty heavy so your cat can really stretch out on it and scratch on it without it wobbling. So make sure, like if you walk up to it and you kind of wiggle it, it really stays pretty steady. There's a great one, and again, I'm not getting any financial support from any of these companies. The brands that I may recommend to you during a episode are brands that I am familiar with and have had good experiences with. So there's a scratching post from Smart Cat that I really like. It's a little bit more pricey than some of the others, but you can usually find it on sale for a pretty good price at some point during the year. And it's a great scratching post. Your full-size cat can fully stretch out on it and not knock it over when they scratch, and they can jump up and sit on the top of it. It's pretty great. And it's a heavy, outdoor carpet, which is just really nice for them. It's not that soft carpet. A lot of times you'll see scratching posts that are kind of soft carpet. That's not great for scratching. You want like a sisal carpet or an outdoor kind of carpet. You're going to want some kind of climbing structure or kitty condo as tall as you can make it. So it doesn't need to be huge and wide, but something that has levels on it so your kitty can get up high. Of course, depending on the cat's mobility. So if you are adopting, maybe a geriatric cat with arthritis, or if you're adopting a cat with cerebellar hypoplasia, which we'll talk about in another episode on neurologic disorders. But if you know what it is, that's a wobbly kitty, then you may not want as much vertical space, or you need to make sure that you have support, little railings and that sort of thing, which you can find stuff like that for kitties that need a little bit of extra help with climbing. But for most cats, we want to get as much vertical space for them as we can so they can do tree climbing basically in the house. Whatever you can do to catify your house with kitty furniture and that sort of thing is great for them. Lots of toys, again, depending on the cat, but even geriatric kitties should still be playful. My 14-year-old boy insists on his regularly scheduled playtimes and then the occasional sort of ad-lib playtime. Cats are very playful by nature, being hunters. Their play styles tend to be based on their hunting behavior. So you want to make sure that you get a variety of toys with a kitty that you don't know so that you can try out different stuff. Some cats will play fetch with a ball. I had a kitty who played fetch, and it was just fantastic and so fun. And he had one favorite little Mylar ball that was his favorite from kittenhood. until his very final days. And it was just adorable. He played with this toy his whole life. So some kitties will have major, major favorite toys like that. Other cats are going to like a fishing pole style toy, like the bird or the mouse, which is a really fun one that you can bounce around and they can kind of fly and jump after it. Different cats have different play styles, so you might have to experiment a little bit. My kitty that I have now requires lots of creativity in his play, and he likes it to be sort of complex with lots of subterfuge and kind of. He plays 007 kind of play style. So some cats need a little bit more coaxing than others, but we should be able to get them playing. And it might take, a week or two or even more if you've got one of those more shy kitties to kind of coax them into play. But get a variety of toys so that you can try different stuff with them and figure out what they like and what gets them excited and engaged. Kitty beds, it's nice to have. Some cats will look at the bed you got them and go, what's that? I'm going to go sleep in this cardboard box. So they may or may not love them, where, a lot of dogs really just love their bed. Some cats will love the fluffy bed you got them, and some of them are going to just sleep in your bed or a cardboard box, which is a favorite for most cats. So you can certainly get one and have it ready for them. But definitely, as long as you have little hidey holes somewhere in the house, comfy spots for them, they might co-opt one of your laundry baskets and make it their own, that sort of thing. Just make sure they've got some, nice, quiet, comfortable, soft places that they can sleep. You're also going to want probably to get nail clippers and something like Quick Stop, which is a coagulant, a procoagulant, in case you actually hit a vessel when you're clipping a nail, which is very easy to not do in cats. But having nail clippers and getting your kitty used to having their nails trimmed at home is a really good idea. If not, you're probably going to be needing to take them in to a groomer or a vet to get their nails trimmed on a regular basis. So it is great to learn to do it yourself and to be prepared to do that at home. And then kind of lastly, it's nice to have a little bit of catnip or friend of catnip. If some cats don't respond to catnip. So if you have a kitty who you offer some catnip and they're like, oh, what's this? They just don't respond to it. They may respond better to something like silvervine. There are a few other plants as well, like honeysuckle, that some cats will respond to, but silvervine is the kind of the primary alternate to catnip. And the nice thing about catnip, it can relieve stress for one. So if you, especially with a new cat who's timid, a little bit of catnip, once or twice a week can help them kind of unwind. But it's also great just to encourage play. In cats that are a little bit less active, it can get them kind of rolling around and being crazy a little bit more. So it's fun to have, and it's also hilarious to watch. So you should have some. So now, once we have decided on our cat and we've prepared for our cat, we got to bring that kitty home. So introducing the cat to the household, whether or not you have other animals in the house already, you want to plan to have kind of a room of their own initially. If you live in a small place, you may not have a lot of spaces where you can do that. But even if you've got like a walk-in closet or one bedroom or a bathroom, somewhere that can be kind of their headquarters for their initial introduction, start them off there and make sure they have access to anything that they need, all the resources that they need. So you want to have a litter box in there. You want to have food and water, a comfy bed, somewhere that they can hide, maybe a box with some towels in it or a little blanket in it. Somewhere that they can feel safe and protected, and just have them in there initially, get them in there, let them out of the carrier, let them kind of walk around and start smelling, checking things out, give them some love and attention, some treats, and just give them a little bit of time to familiarize themselves with the sounds in the house, the smells, all that kind of stuff. And you might have them just in that room for the first day, even with the door closed, just so that they have some time to adjust. If it's a really confident cat who's immediately out of the carrier, walking around like they own the place, open that door. Some cats will just immediately be like, this is mine. They'll just waltz right in and take over, and they're totally fine. And if it's that cat's personality, that is great. Let them do it. Let them investigate the whole house on the first day, whatever they want. But if it's a more nervous little kitty that really needs to take things slowly, maybe just have them in a bathroom for the first day, then open the door, allow them to come out to the bedroom when they're ready. Give them a little bit of encouragement, but don't force it. Don't pick them up and come out into the living room, because that might really scare them. And then they're going to run and hide under the couch, and then they don't want to come out all day. So we want to give them time, give them support and let them take it at their own pace. And for some cats, that might be a week or two. And that is all right. When I moved up to the Pacific Northwest with my kind of near middle-aged cats, one of my cats immediately just checked out the whole house, and the other cat didn't leave our bedroom for a week. And then once he did, he was fine. He was interested. And of course, now he's all over the place. So it just depends on the kitty, and some of them are going to take a little bit longer than others. So just be patient and let them take it at their own pace. You might consider using a pheromone diffuser. So if you haven't heard of pheromone diffusers before, it is an artificial version of the facial pheromones that cats produce. So when cats rub up against you or furniture, that kind of thing, they have various different scent glands in their face that they're rubbing on those surfaces to mark them for different reasons. So they're not all the same. And so there are a couple of different versions of these pheromones that you can get in a little plug-in diffuser. The one that I would use for a kitty that needs some support when they're feeling stressed, that can help them feel more calm. The brand is called Feline, and they make one called Classic. That was the first one that came out, and that is just for helping to alleviate stress. Or Optimum, which is for both stress and helping to alleviate intercat interactions, or stressful intercat interactions. So if you have a multi-cat household, the Optimum is kind of the best one to choose for that. So if it's going to be more than one cat in this situation, I would go for the Feline Optimum. And those diffusers, so the research on those diffusers is kind of yes and no. So it seems that some cats have a pretty dramatic response to the pheromones, and it really can help them to relax. And other cats, it doesn't seem to do anything for them. So I do think it depends on the cat, but there are no downsides to trying the diffuser. There aren't any side effects. It won't affect you. It won't affect dogs or birds or anybody. I've had them in my house with my birds and everybody, and there's really no downside to trying it. So having it there and plugged in, in the room where the cat's going to be, it might be really helpful for them, and it's not going to hurt them. So it's certainly worth trying. So if you are bringing a new cat home in a household where you already have some cats, you want to be prepared to make really slow introductions. Don't throw them together and just allow them to work it out, in quotes. Don't allow fights to break out. Cats are not they don't have a social structure where there's an alpha cat and a beta cat and it goes down the line. It's not like that with cats. They have a very fluid social structure. Certain cats will be more dominant in certain situations and less dominant in other situations. And they don't just immediately make social bonds. So where dogs, you can take them to a dog park, they can meet a totally strange dog they've never met before. They do a meet and greet and they decide, we're friends, and they go and play together. For most cats, it doesn't work that way, although there are some where it does. Cats have widely variable personalities, which is one of the just fantastic things about them. But for most cats, they are wary of new cats. A new cat in their territory can be a real threat. So if we just throw a couple of new cats together, most likely they're going to be really stressed out and they're going to fight. And letting them do that together is not going to lead to them working it out and figuring out who goes where. What we want to do is we want to be in control of the situation. So when we bring a new kitty home, we want to make sure that new kitty has their own spot, a room in the house that can be closed off to whatever resident kitties are already there, where they have all of their resources, like we talked about. And they don't have to try to share with the other cats, and the other cats don't have to share with this newcomer. And you're going to have them in that space for as long as it takes for these cats to get used to each other and get comfortable with each other. Totally separate resources, and we're going to only allow, they're going to be able to hear each other maybe if we're meowing at all through the barrier of the door. And then we're going to start sharing scent. So they're physically separated from each other. You're going to be giving all cats involved lots of reassurance, positive reinforcement when they're being calm and curious. You're going to be like, oh, what a good kitty. You're so great. And you're going to give them treats and just give them a lot of reward for being calm, curious, or if they're just kind of going, I don't really care, reward that too. And then start swapping scents. So I had a client many years ago who brought me a kitty, and she was complaining that she had gotten this cat a few months ago and the cats in the household weren't getting along. And she said, I've been rubbing my dirty underwear all over all of them and it just doesn't seem to be working. And I thought, gosh, those poor cats. Why on earth would you do such a thing to those poor kitties? No wonder they're not happy. Your crotch smell is not the smell that is going to bring them together in love. What you need to do is put, some bedding, towels, blankets, whatever, in with each group of kitties and let them get their scent on those and then swap those. You want the scent of the other cats to be introduced to the second set of cats. It's not about you or any of the odors that you may or may not produce. You want the cats to get used to each other's scents so they can investigate the scent without any threat of the other cat, like standing there staring at them. And so first we let them get used to the scent. We let them hear each other. Then we're going to allow some visual contact. So this needs to be very closely supervised. We don't want any physical contact initially. So what you might do, if you have the option, like my sister in her awesome multi-cat household actually put a gate, like a grated gate in the hallway so that one kitty had access to like 2 rooms, the new kitty, and the rest of the cats had the rest of the house, but they could start to see each other through this gate. So they were kind of seeing each other from afar, but there was no potential for fighting or interaction physically. And that's a great way if you have that available. Another way to do it would be to get like a little doggy door. But if you start using that, you need to be right there because, of course, cats can jump over that. So if you have a cat who gets really freaked out and is like, I'm going to go get that other cat, you need to be right there so you can grab them and close the door. So, but that can be an initial little barrier where, they can't just immediately access each other, but they can start to see each other. And if they're starting to, investigate each other, maybe they start coming closer to that barrier. They're acting pretty calm. They're not doing a lot of hissing. They're not growling. They're not fluffing up. Especially if they do start to maybe sniff noses and they're doing okay with that. Now, initially, there's probably going to be some hissing and maybe some growling, but that should calm down as they get used to each other and you're giving them treats when they're being calm and that sort of thing. And as that calms down, then we can remove the barrier and watch them closely, still continue to supervise closely initially. And cats may kind of, walk around and be sniffing each other, kind of watching each other as they're getting used to things. And initially you probably want to still keep them separate at night or when you're not home, for a few more days. And then once you're sure that they're being okay with each other, they're either ignoring each other or they're starting to play a little bit and they're not hissing, they're not growling, then we're okay to let them be out together. And that's ideal, of course, is that they get used to each other and they become best friends and they curl up in a ball together and sleep together and it's so cute and they groom each other and that's the most best thing. Sometimes it doesn't work out that way, but as long as they're tolerant of each other, they're not getting in each other's way. Maybe they don't really want to hang out, but they're fine with the other cat being, on the couch next to them. That's okay too. Now, if you're introducing a cat into a household with dogs, you're going to do a similar kind of thing. If the dog is a larger dog, or even a sort of medium large dog, you do want to make sure that you are very certain what that dog's prey drive looks like. So if you're not familiar with prey drive in dogs, this is their tendency to chase after and potentially try to kill smaller animals. So if you do have a dog who tends to run after bunny rabbits, or if they see cats, they chase cats. Probably not the best choice to be introducing a cat into a home that has such a dog, because it really may not be safe for the cat. And even if the dog does back off, if they tend to chase cats, that's extremely stressful for the cat. So we probably don't want to get a kitty into that situation. That's going to be very stressful for them. We also want to ensure that cats have easy access to escape routes if there is a dog in the home. So even if it's a dog that we know is going to be safe, if the cat is not used to dogs, And being exposed to a dog is going to be stressful and scary initially, but we're working on a nice, slow introduction. We do want to make sure that if the dog does decide, oh, I'm going to do a little bit of chase, or maybe try to instigate play with the cat, but the cat is really not ready for that, we want to make sure that the cat feels safe. And so they need to have easy escape routes. So through a doggy door, you can get doggy doors that have a cat door in it, so the kitty can get through, but the dog can't. Or cats usually can jump the doggy door, unless we're talking about an older kitty or a cat that has some mobility limits. So they're missing a leg, or they've got any kind of musculoskeletal issue where they're not going to be able to jump. Make sure that they have somewhere that they can get away from the dog. The dog cannot get in that room. For cats that do climb just fine, having high perches, especially like in the main living area where they can climb a tree basically and look down at the dog and look down on everyone. That's a great way for cats to build confidence and feel more safe. So definitely don't allow dogs to chase cats. Again, we're not going to just let them work it out on their own. That's not going to go well. It's just going to be terrifying for the cat and potentially dangerous for the cat as well. If you have a younger dog who's really rambunctious and just really wants to play with the cat, what you can do for the first few weeks of introducing is put the dog on a long lead. So you have a long leash attached to their collar or harness that they're hanging out with whenever the cat is in the area. And if they do start chasing the cat, step on the end of that leash and then get a hold of it. What we want to avoid doing is an accidental game of chase that might reinforce the dog's chasing behavior. So if the dog starts chasing the cat and then you start chasing the dog to get them away from the cat, it turns into a really fun game for the dog. And that tends to reinforce that behavior, meaning it will make it more likely that the dog will continue to engage in that behavior. So what we want to do is just step on that long lead to stop them and kind of reel them in, give them something else to focus on, and be very careful about not giving them a lot of attention if they're chasing the cat and not engaging them in a really fun game at that time. So maybe, oh, hey, let's go over here. Let's look at something else. Let's sit quietly for a minute. Maybe work on a sit, lie down. Okay, shake hands. All right, now we've redirected. Let's go and play with some other toy and make sure that the kitty has gone somewhere where they feel nice and safe. So that's kind of introductions in a nutshell. We're going to now start moving on to resources for kitty cats, starting with the litter box, one of the most important resources for a cat that is primarily indoors. But even a lot of cats that go outdoors will also use a litter box, especially if they don't have total control over their access to the outdoors. So if they don't have a kitty door that they can go in and out whenever they want and they're relying on people to open and close the door for them, probably a good idea to have a litter box and get them used to it. Most cats are super easy to train to use the litter box. As tiny little kittens, you put them in the litter box, you move their little feet a little bit when you know it's a time when they're about ready to go, and they will usually use it on the first try. So cats are amazing as far as potty training. There are issues around litter boxes, and we certainly see cats go outside of the litter box, and we will talk about that more in depth in a later episode on urinary tract health. But for now, we'll talk about setting the cat up for success. So that starts with the type of litter box. You want to get the largest box that you can fit in your space. You can have it covered or not have it covered. It kind of depends on the cat. I do recommend having a box that has higher sides because a lot of cats will kick up the litter and some of them will pee standing and kind of hit over the edge. They might pee over the edge of the box on accident, thinking that they're in there, but they're getting it over the side. That can happen with poop as well. So having a higher sided box that is as large as you can get it, lots of room for the cat to move around in there, is a good idea. So having a covered box, if you're going to do that route, I would try to get one that has a translucent cover so the cat feels like they can see out, or have one that has an opening sort of in the front and on the top so the cat doesn't feel like they're trapped inside the litter box, because that can be an issue for some kitties. And then we have options for automated litter boxes. So I have some things to say about automated boxes. One of the great things about scooping the litter box is that you're monitoring the cat's health. And I think that's a really important part of monitoring health. And I'll talk about that a little bit more later. So I actually prefer that people scoop the litter box themselves, or that they're using, if you want to use an automated litter box, like a litter robot kind of situation, there are these very fancy new ones that monitor your cat's activity in the box. So it will tell you via usually an app how often each cat, and it can usually identify the separate cats, which cat is going in the box, how often they're going, and what they did. So if they produced urine, if they produced a stool, or if they went in there and didn't actually produce anything. And they also can check your cat's weight and that sort of thing. So those are great for health monitoring, but they are extremely expensive. So those nice litter box that do the scooping and all that stuff for you are quite expensive. There is a less expensive option that doesn't do the scooping for you. So you do the scooping and you're doing that part of the monitoring, but there's a plate that kind of goes underneath the litter box that also can identify your different cats and monitor how often they're going into the box and what they're producing. And it also checks their weight. And I love that. I have one for my cat. And it's, again, I don't get any kickback from Purina or anything like this, but the Purina Petivity litter box monitor is awesome for that. And it's a lot less expensive. I mean, it's not, I wouldn't say it's cheap, but it's a lot less expensive than the boxes that also do the scooping for you. And then what I like to use also is a litter genie. And once again, not getting a kickback from this company, but the litter genie is basically like a diaper genie. So you scoop the box, you dump the stuff in there, and you pull the little lever, and it drops down into a bag, and it keeps it kind of sealed. So it's not producing odor, but it just makes the whole scooping the litter box kind of easier and more efficient. And then you just have to dump that bag out, once a week or however often, depending on how many cats are using that box. You definitely want to scoop daily, at least once a day. And if you have more than one cat, the guideline that you want to strive to follow is 1 box per cat plus 1. Not everybody can manage to do that. If you live in a tiny apartment and you have 2 or 3 cats, you probably cannot fit 4 litter boxes in there without it being kind of a disgusting situation where you've got litter boxes in the living room and that sort of thing. I know nobody wants that. So being realistic, you want to try to at least have 1 box per cat. But if you do have cats that get along very well, especially litter mates that grew up together, and you have a nice big litter box, you probably can get away with 1 box for 2 cats. But I will tell you that the guidelines, the recommendations from the veterinary community are that you have 1 box per cat plus 1. So if you can, try to do that. And as far as types of litter, we did already talk a bit about litter types earlier on, but I'm going to go into some more detail here. So forgive a little bit of repeat, but I do want to give you a bit more detail and foundation so you can have a little bit more help when you're choosing what type of litter to use. The litter that is generally recommended for most cats to be comfortable and healthy is going to be a clay-based clumping litter that is unscented. I don't know why all of the litters are scented, because I don't think that adding a flowery scent to your poop really makes it smell any better. It just doesn't do it for me. But cats really don't like it, and that's the most important thing. If kitties liked it, I would be all for it. But cats in general have a somewhat negative to mediocre response to the scents that are added to the litter. So they tend to accept a litter better that is unscented and that has activated charcoal in it. And there are lots of brands of litter out there that do make a clay-based clumping litter that has activated charcoal in it. So that is my recommendation. And most cats use that type of litter very well. They're attracted to the litter to use for pooping and peeing, and they're more likely to use the box regularly. And most cats do use the box regularly without problems, but there are some cats that will have a litter aversion. And there are some of unfortunately, they are the more natural and probably more environmentally friendly types of litter, but a lot of cats will develop an aversion to that type of litter because of how it interacts with the scent of their waste. Or how it feels on their feet. There are lots of other things that can play into that. But if you have been using like a pine-based litter or grass-based litter or wheat-based or whatever for your cat forever and they are fine with it, great, stick with that. But if you have a cat who is going out of the box or you get a new kitty and you're finding that they're going out of the box and you're using one of those litters, I would switch to a clay-based unscented clumping litter and see if they do better. Because I have met many, many kitties that are not using the litter box entirely because of the type of litter. So I would start with that as your baseline and see how they do. I would say my second favorite is the grass-based litter. I haven't had any complaints about that, and I've used it even in my own super picky kitties, and they seem to do fine with it. So that probably would be my next choice, where I have encountered lots of issues with most of the other types of litter. So, and as I said, you do want to scoop at least once a day. And if you have multiple cats that are sharing boxes, you probably need to scoop twice a day. But you definitely don't want to be leaving stuff in there for more than 24 hours. And if you are going out of town and having a pet sitter, make it very clear to them that you want that box scooped every day. And if you have a litter box monitor, you can be monitoring that from afar. So I like my litter box monitor for checking in to make sure the box has been scooped when I'm not the one that's in charge of scooping it. And then you also are going to want to make sure to clean that litter box completely about every 2 weeks, every 1 to 2 weeks, depending on, again, how many cats are using the box and how much activity it's getting. I do my boxes every 2 weeks where I dump everything out, scrub it with soap and water. You don't need to use bleach unless you've had an animal that has been ill and you want to be extra careful. But in general, if you just do soap and water, wash it really well, dry it thoroughly, and then refill it with all fresh, clean litter, you should be in good shape. The next highly important resource, of course, is food and water. We want to make sure that we're keeping our food and water completely separate from the litter box. I know a lot of home situations where people have set up all of the kitty's stuff in the same place, thinking it's all easy access for the cat, but they actually do not like their food and water to be near their litter box, just like you probably don't want to make breakfast in the bathroom, hopefully. It's not very sanitary. They have a very strong sense of smell, much stronger than ours. So having the litter box right next to their food and water resources is not a good plan. So please make sure those are separate, ideally in completely different rooms. If not, if that's not a possibility, at least have them across the room from each other as much as possible. Water fountains are a really great idea for kitties. If you don't have one already for your cats, I highly recommend trying one. You want to make sure that you get one that is made for cats that has a charcoal filter that's replaceable. That charcoal filter needs to be replaced every 3 to 6 months, depending on the type and the size that you get. And there should be a guideline when you buy the fountain. And the running water is just really attractive to most cats. You'll find if you've had cats, you probably already know that they want to come to the faucet and they want you to turn the faucet on, or they might even get into the shower and try to look shower water that's spraying. They just like running water. They'll drink out of ponds that are bubbling and that kind of thing. So having a water fountain is a great way to encourage cats to drink a bit more water. And when we're feeding a lot of dry food, we need them to drink more water because they're not getting as much water in their diet as they would if they were eating what they evolved to eat, which would be live prey that has a lot of water in it. So getting them to drink more water is very good for their urinary tract and their regular daily hydration status. So fountains are a great idea. You do want to make sure, again, it's made for cats and it has a quiet motor as well. Because if it's buzzy or loud, that can be a deterrent for the kitties. Another option is to use a larger bowl of water. So oftentimes people use, little kitty dishes for the water. And a lot of cats just don't like that. And if you have a dog, you'll notice your cat may go and drink out of the dog's water bowl. So I use a dog bowl for my kitty as well as a fountain. And my cats have always loved that. So they always have gone to the dog-sized water bowl and have no interest in drinking out of an itty-bitty little bowl. Although they will drink out of your water glass because that one is special. So keep an eye on your glasses too because your cats might stick their faces in there. I don't know why they like a glass and not a kitty dish, but they're silly. And do make sure that you are cleaning your water bowls at least once a day. And I mean wash it out. Don't just dump it and add fresh water because there will be a film forming around the edge, the surface of the bowl that traps bacteria, and it can get really nasty and gross really fast. And you may not notice that it's there. You can't see it. It's a clear film for a long time. If you let it go long enough, it won't be clear anymore, and that's really bad. But it's trapping quite a bit of bacteria from the bacteria that's in the cat's mouth, bacteria that's in the environment, and it's not good for the water. And the cats will notice the change in taste very quickly, and it's not good for them, and they won't drink it. So make sure that you're fully washing out water bowls every day. Those need to be, you don't necessarily always have to use soap as long as you're using friction with your hand to make sure that you're clearing any film away and it feels like the bowl is nice and clean, but you should scrub it with a scrubber and soap every few days at least, and definitely wash it out thoroughly every day. If you have a water fountain, because those usually have a little filter in them, and I definitely recommend you use the filter, they can go longer. So with a fountain, you can let that go for about up to 2 weeks. And then you need to scrub it thoroughly, though. Scrub it with soap and water, and you need to take the motor apart and wash all the little pieces. It depends on the model that you have, but it should have parts that come out that you can wash out any little tubing and all that kind of stuff, because it will get algae and gross stuff in it. We don't want them drinking that. So make sure that with fountains, you're scrubbing them at least every 2 weeks. And then as far as your regular dishes, there's some stuff out in the media about whisker fatigue. I do want to say this has not been studied. We don't have any data telling us whether or not whisker fatigue is a real thing. Some people think it is. Some people think it's not. I don't think that you should worry too much about it, but using a more shallow, wide kitty dish is probably a good idea just in case. I do use kind of a shallow, wide dish for my cats, although I've never seen a cat have an issue with eating out of any kind of little kitty bowl. I don't recommend using plastic dishes because we get a lot more bacterial growth in plastic dishes, and we can see cats develop stuff like chin acne with plastic dishes most commonly. And they're just a lot harder to keep clean and sanitary. So I recommend using stainless steel or ceramic or glass dishes. They're very easy to clean. And you want to make sure, again, to clean those dishes regularly. So canned food, you should be cleaning a dish that had canned food in it after they have finished that meal. So that should be the same day. So even if you're feeding canned food twice a day, don't put it in the same dish that has any old residue in it. Put a clean, fresh dish down. This just gives you an excuse to buy all kinds of really cute little kitty dishes. So get plenty of dishes so you can put a fresh dish down. If you're doing canned food twice a day, you're putting a fresh dish down twice a day. For dry food, you need to wash that bowl out every few days. And this is one that a lot of people don't know. We think of dry food as this kind of dry, inert thing. It's not. It's meat and oil. And the cat is getting their mouth in there and kind of getting saliva in the bowl and licking the sides of it and that sort of thing. So there's all kinds of bacteria that will grow, again, on the surface of the bowl very quickly. So I wouldn't go any more than 2 days between switching dry food bowls out. And if you have it in you to do it every day, I would do it every day. So switch the bowls out or wash them, dry them, and return them. Even with the dry food, for really good hygiene. And especially if you have a cat who has struggled with chin acne, if you haven't been scrubbing out the dry food bowls regularly, that may be the culprit. And I do want to make a comment about raw food here. There's lots and lots of controversy about this, but right now, in this time in the United States, we are having a pretty significant avian influenza outbreak across the entire country. And we have seen some kitties get very sick and even die from eating raw food that had contaminated meat or dairy products in it that had avian influenza. So at least for right now, I want to ask you to not feed your cats raw diet, even if it's a freeze-dried raw diet. We've had several that have been recalled because they were contaminated, and we found out they were contaminated because cats died from eating it. So right now, let's not feed raw, please, because it's not worth the risk to your cat. And if you're doing raw food at home, again, there's so much risk for Salmonella, E. coli, and other food poisoning. I have always had patients that have gotten sick eating raw diets, but in this particular case, the risk is so high because cats are so susceptible to avian influenza, the strain that's going around right now. We have had so many fatalities, it's not worth the risk. So we'll talk more about diet on a future episode, and I will have a nutritionist talk with us about the pros and cons of feeding raw diets and all of the other diet options. But for now, that's my recommendation. Now, I've talked about dishes. I also want to talk about alternate ways of feeding cats that are even more fun than just feeding out of dishes. So there are all kinds of stuff out on the market now that are already made for you in the form of puzzle feeders and hunting toys, and they're great for cats, for enrichment and for slowing them down. So if you've ever had a cat who has done the scarf and barf, where they eat their food and 10 minutes later they barf it up, or even in some cases they regurgitate it right back into their dish, this is usually happening because they're eating too fast or too much at one time, or both. And that's relatively common in cats because their stomach is very reactive to being suddenly full of a lot of food. So we can get this just reactive regurgitation. Now, if you have a cat who is having frequent vomiting or regurgitation, you definitely should talk to your vet about that because it is not normal. But in a cat who is doing it very shortly after eating and is otherwise acting totally fine and healthy, it may be because they're eating too much, too fast, etc. So using puzzle feeders or hunting toys and teaching the kitty to use these. So you do have to kind of take it in steps and start putting a little bit of their food and maybe a treat or two in there to entice them and get them used to using these other ways of eating. And then eventually, once the cat gets used to it, you can move on to feeding them all of their food in these kind of toys so that they have to do some work to get the food out. They're going to eat more slowly. And they often will feel full and sated on less food. So it's also great for weight management for overweight cats. There's a toy that or a feeding toy that I really love. It's called the Doc and Phoebe mice. And it comes as a kit that kind of walks you through how to introduce the cat to it. And it's these little mice that you fill with the food and you hide them around the house and Kitty has to go hunting for them and then bat them around to get the food out. And that is awesome for indoor cat enrichment and slowing down the feeding and all that kind of stuff. So I highly recommend the use of puzzle feeders and those kinds of hunting toys to get cats more busy and active and engaged in getting their food, which is something that they would be doing in the wild that we take away from them when we have them indoors. And even for cats that go outside and have some fun outdoor time, this is still great for them in order to keep them engaged and just busy using their brain and that sort of thing to get their food and to slow down their eating. So cats are designed to eat small, frequent meals, and they do need some variety. They are obligate carnivores, and they have a very specific need for a certain ratios of amino acids. So if you have a cat who is eating one diet for a few days and then they don't want it, they're acting like they don't like it and they're acting so-called finicky. They want something different and then they eat that different thing and this is great. And then after a few days, they don't want that anymore. Part of that is because their body is telling them, I'm a little deficient in this amino acid. I need something different. So that's normal for cats to need some variety in their diet. So it's a good idea to already be planning to kind of change things up. So what I do is have 2 to 3 types of dry food that are my cat's staple foods. And then I have about 4 or 5 flavors of canned food across 2 different brands. So their formulas are similar. They're not going to be drastically different on the cat's GI tract. But they're different flavors kind of within the same brand and formula so that I can change them up. So every day we get a different flavor of canned food, and then we'll kind of go back and forth between the dry foods depending on what the cat is acting like he wants. And that way, their GI tract is used to it. You're not introducing something drastically different that might cause a reaction where we might have diarrhea or even vomiting if we introduce a bunch of a new food all at once. You have stuff that you've kind of gradually introduced that you just rotate through. I find cats tend to do best on that type of a feeding schedule. And then you want to, even if you're feeding out of dishes, try to feed at least 4 small meals a day instead of doing 1 or 2 big meals a day or just putting a bunch of dry food out and leaving it out all day because it's going to oxidize and it's going to go bad over being out for the whole day. So we want to make sure that we're doing fresh food every day and ideally doing 4 to 6 small meals throughout the day. Let's move on to some other environmental goodies for kitties. So cats are both predators and prey species. So you will notice that they do like to hide. And they do need to have areas to go where they feel safe. So if they hear a scary noise or somebody unknown comes to the door and they're nervous of new people or anything that makes them feel a little uncomfortable, they have a spot where they can go and feel safe. So that it might be a spot under the bed. It might be in your closet, behind something. Make sure that they do have that and that there's a comfortable spot where they can go and hide and feel safe. And it may be a place where they want to go and take naps and that sort of thing. Or it may be a spot where they only go when they're nervous about something. So just make sure they do have access to those kinds of like hidey holes and safe zones in at least a couple spots in the house. And then you also want to make sure to use as much vertical space for them as you can. So if you can get nice tall perches, there are all kinds of cool cat furnishings that are made these days that you can fit into any kind of housing area, that you can have shelves that go up a wall. You can have freestanding kitty condos, all kinds of stuff, but whatever you can work into your house and your decor, there's all kinds of very pretty and functional stuff available these days. Get as much as you can for your cat to go vertical. They love to climb, they love to be up high, and it's really good enrichment for them. It's good exercise for them. Using their muscles and their joints in climbing is so good for them. And just having that option to be up high when they want to is great for their psychological health. Having access to some windows too that they can look out, and ideally in nicer weather have open enough that not so that they can get through the screen. If you have a cat who's interested in doing that, we don't want them in danger. So you may have to crack the screen if you have one of those kitties, or crack the window if you have one of those kitties who might try to get out through the screen. But so make sure they're safe, but have access to some fresh air and that sort of thing. That's all really good for their mental health. And then finally, as far as physical health, their feet and their claws really need scratching posts. And this is also a really important behavior for cats. So you need to have surfaces that they are allowed to and interested in scratching on. Now, I know I already mentioned the Smart Cat scratching post as one of my very favorite. And I do love that one. There certainly are lots of other great scratching posts out there. As far as the Smart Cat, they'll last you a few years before the cat has thoroughly destroyed that heavy-duty kind of sisal carpet. And so you do end up having to replace them over time. But that's a really great scratching post. A lot of cats also really like the cardboard scratching. Not necessarily posts, but those are more horizontal type of scratchers. So some cats do like to scratch more on the ground, and some cats like to scratch more vertically, and a lot of cats like to do both. So having a variety for them is great. So those cardboard ones can be a lot of fun, or the ones that have the nice heavy duty kind of indoor-outdoor carpet or sisal carpet or sisal rope that's wrapped around the post. Those are great. The softer carpet is not that great for scratching. So I would go for that stuff that's a little bit more heavy duty. If your cats are trying to scratch on your furniture instead, get some double-sided sticky tape. And there are some pet supply stores that sell this, and it's a nice wide, like a 2 or 3 inch wide tape that's very clear, and you stick it on the areas of your furniture where the cats are scratching, and when they go to scratch, it'll stick to their feet, and they really don't like that. I have found that to be very, very effective for most cats that are scratching on your furniture. And then make sure that you put a scratching post near the spot where they're scratching, because part of what they're doing when they're sharpening their claws is they're scent marking. And so that's a spot where they want a scent mark. So you want to put a scratching object that you want them to scratch on near that spot, because they're going to want to go somewhere near that spot to do the scent marking part. So there also is a scratch attractant that you can get, I believe is made by Feline. So if you're really having a hard time getting a cat to use a scratcher that is a designated scratching space, you can also use this cat attract stuff that attracts them to the scratching post. So I find that most cats, if you just show them the scratcher, you also can scratch on it with your nails if you do that a few times. And then if they come over to investigate, give them a lot of positive reinforcement. Good kitty. Oh, you're so smart. You're so great. They usually will start scratching on it too, especially young cats. If you do the scratchy on the post, young kitties often will go, oh, what are you doing? I'm going to do that. So that's a great way to just encourage them to use the scratching post. All right. I want to talk a little bit about the indoor versus outdoor great debate on cats. There are pros and cons to keeping cats indoor only, and there are pros and cons to letting cats outside. So we'll talk about both options. In general, I recommend keeping kitties indoors, and the reasons for that are manyfold. Cats going outside are at risk of all kinds of dangers. So if you live in an area with cars, which you probably do, cars are a massive danger to cats. There's potential for injury from other animals, either getting into fights with other cats or getting attacked seriously by larger predatory animals. If you live in an area where you have coyotes or bobcats or eagles or owls, they can kill your cat. And, it's a huge risk to let your cats outdoors. So if you do decide to let your cats outdoors, be aware they are going to be subject to those very serious risks to their health and life. They're also going to be at much higher risk of exposure to parasites and infectious diseases, both from other cats and from wildlife, from eating prey. They are going to catch birds and mice and little reptiles and whatever they can get, bugs, all kinds of stuff. They are going to be exposed to all kinds of parasites and potentially bacteria and viruses and that sort of thing from that and from potential fights with other cats. So if you do decide to let your cats outdoors, you do want to make sure they are up to date on all of the recommended vaccines, and you want to make sure that they are on a good parasite preventive. So I mean a prescription parasite preventive that will cover for internal and external parasites. Super, super important to make sure you're protecting them as much as you can, but be aware there are going to be things out there that they will be exposed to that you're not going to have any control over. And it's scary out there. And also there is serious risk to our songbird populations. I don't want to gloss over that. I love birds as much as I love cats. And cats that are cared for have access to a really good diet. They have access to medical care. They're very healthy. They still are going to hunt birds and other animals outside, and they do have a massive impact on our songbird populations. And many of our songbirds are threatened or endangered across the country, and cats are doing a lot of extra damage to them, especially to babies, which are easier for them to catch and injure or kill. If your cat does catch a bird, please do look into a wildlife rehabilitation center near you to bring the bird into if they are injured. So don't just let them be. If you can help them if they are injured, if there's a wildlife rehab center near you, please do call them for advice and potentially to take that animal in. So those are the major downsides of outdoor stuff. Cats also can potentially get lost. So they get startled, they take off running. They can get lost and not be able to find their way back home. These are all serious problems with letting cats outdoors. So in addition to parasite prevention and vaccines, as far as keeping your kitty safe, if you do decide to let them go outdoors, I also would think about not just a collar with some form of ID on it, but definitely a microchip, which your veterinarian can implant. And you can register to all of your contact information so that if they do get lost and someone brings them into a vet or a shelter, they can be scanned and reconnected to you. You also can get some pretty cool satellite trackers these days. So there's some pretty nifty stuff that you can find online for actually tracking your cat with an app so that you can locate them. Of course, the tracker has to stay on them. These are out of the body. So unfortunately, our current microchip technology does not allow us to actually track the cat. They have to be scanned and the number tracked back to you. But there are some locators that you can put on the cat's collar that are pretty cool. So I would certainly do that. And I also would consider not letting them outdoors at night when there's a higher risk of contact with predators, and also you being asleep so that if they are trying to get back in the house or something happens outdoors, you may not be aware of it if you're deeply asleep and you don't hear anything happening. Whereas if you're letting them outside, maybe during the day when you're home, maybe morning and evening kind of thing, you have a better chance of being nearby if they get into some trouble and you hear them shout for you or run for the door. And also having a kitty door so that they can easily access the indoors when they need to is an excellent idea. One that you can lock for the night so that they can't go back out, and one that ideally is microchip activated, although those are certainly going to be a lot more expensive. But having a microchip activated door does allow you to prevent other critters that you may not want in your house from getting in your house. So skunks and small raccoons potentially can get in. Opossums, they're really cute, but you probably don't want them in your house. The upside of going outdoors is it is very enriching for them. They get a lot of exercise. They get a lot of mental stimulation. They love it. They love the fresh air. They love watching the birds. They love lying in the sun. So, it's kind of sad to say, well, I'm never going to let you out there, because most cats want to be out there. So I do understand the dilemma. I live with cats myself. I completely get it. So I do want to talk a bit about how to make indoor life as enriching and wonderful as possible for cats. So one of those is making sure that, they have those resources that we already talked about, including vertical space and some access to windows and that kind of thing. And if you can do it, a catio is the best thing ever. So having an enclosed, kitty run that is outdoors but is totally protected. So it has some kind of a roof on it, whether that's a metal grate kind of thing or a solid roof. Having at least part of it a solid roof is nice because if it's raining or snowing, they can still go out there. And then it's, some kind of wire mesh sort of thing around the sides. Now, we added one of these to a patio, our existing patio, that is removable. We made it in little wood frames, so it's in several pieces and we can remove it if we move out of this house. And that's something that might be accessible if you rent your house to do something like that, as long as you talk to your landlord about it, of course. There also are these catio kits that you can get online that just go over a window, and those, again, are removable. So you can you attach it to the outside of the window. It's small, but it allows the kitty to be able to go in and out. And what you do is you install a kitty door in that window so they have control over when they go in and out. And that's so nice for them. It's a huge stress relief. They can lay in the sun, they can watch the birds, they can hear all the sounds and smell everything. It's really enriching for them. So some form of a catio, even if it's a small one that's just on a window, or if it's, like a dog run kind of situation, anything that gives them that access to the outdoors without them being exposed to all those dangers and keeping them close to home so that if something scary does happen, they can run right back in the house. It also, as long as you use a small enough grate on the whatever wire walls that you're making, I would make it small enough that birds can't really get in there. So we're also protecting the birds. Birds can actually get in, but they have enough warning from the noise of the kitty door that they can take off before the cat gets out there. They know not to go in there when the cats are in there. So you do want to make sure, if you are building one of these, if it's not attached to your house, or if the cat is going to have their own access, so if you're going to have a kitty door so the cat can go in and out at their leisure, you want to make sure that it's predator proof. So you want to make sure that, a raccoon or somebody can't get into the catio if your cat's going to have free access to it. Now, if a catio is just not an option, you rent a small apartment on the third floor and the landlord won't let you put a window unit thing in or anything, harness training is another option. So it's not for every cat and it's not for every person, because it is not like walking a dog for most cats. Most cats are not just going to go like, yeah, we're going for a walk. Once you get them used to the harness, and I'll talk about that part a little bit more, but once they're out there and they're exploring the great outdoors, they want to go smell everything and walk around and go into little holes and try to get under the house. And so it's a different experience. And they may be standing in one place for a long time, just smelling plants and maybe rolling around. So it's not the same as walking a dog, and you need to be prepared for that if you're going to be walking your kitty on a harness. Now, some cats will go for a walk and they think it's really fun. And especially if you do have a dog, they might go for a walk with you with the dog. And they might be more prone to do that if there is a dog involved and they're kind of getting the cue from the dog to do that. But the most important part of having a cat on a harness is safety. So you do want to make sure that you get a harness that is made specifically for cats, so it is fittable to a cat's body, not a small dog's body. They are shaped differently. And then you're going to need to get your cat used to the smell and the feel of the harness. So don't try to just put it on and take them outside. That is not going to probably go well. So let your cat sniff the harness, give them treats while they're sniffing the harness. So they're like, ooh, this is pretty cool. Then maybe even just put the harness like over their shoulders and give them treats, tell them how great they are. Just do that just for a couple minutes, or even a minute a day. And then work towards, we're going to put the first loop over your head and then take it right back off. So this is just getting the cat conditioned to the feeling of the harness, because a lot of cats, you'll notice you put something on them and they flatten out like a pancake and they will not move. They're not used to having stuff on their body. Now, if it's a cat who's already used to wearing a collar, or you introduced the harness as a little kitten, they probably accepted it a lot more quickly. But if you're starting to introduce this to an adult cat, it can be a slow process. Be ready to be patient and give it a couple weeks if it needs a couple weeks. A lot of cats will get used to it within a few days if you just take kind of slow steps and give them lots of reward for it. And if it's a cat who's really eager to get outside, once you get to a point of we can put it on and we can get the part around the chest and we can, latch it closed, it's fitted nicely, it's snug but not tight, then we're ready to go outside. And for a cat who's super excited about going outside, that's going to be the major reward. And they'll start associating the harness with getting to go outside and they'll love it. But you do also want to make sure that you're letting anyone else at home know that you're taking the cat out. I made the horrible mistake of taking my cat out on his harness one day and didn't tell my husband we're going to be outside. And he opened the garage door with the clicker from inside the house, and all of a sudden this very noisy garage door started moving and making a horrible noise, and my cat freaked out and he got away from me. It was a fiasco. Luckily, he ran straight for the front door, and he's a smart kitty, and I let him in, and he didn't go try to run under the house or something awful like that, which would have been terrible because we do have coyotes and all kinds of other creatures around here. So make sure that you're letting anybody know, okay, I'm going to be walking the kitty outside. We need to be aware that he might get easily startled. I have also had my cat pop himself out of that harness in a split second when he got startled. So I had to experiment with different types of harnesses to make sure I had one that wasn't going to be easy for him to Houdini himself out of, because cats are amazing, incredible creatures, and they're made of liquid, and they can get out of pretty much anything that you don't want them to get out of. So make sure that you're fitting the harness really well and that you kind of wiggle it on them and see what they can do. Walk them around in the house with it first before you go outside, and pay attention to safety. Make sure that everybody is comfortable with the harness. The kitty gets used to it enough and gets used to just being outside a little bit with it and walking around, and the feeling of you maybe tugging a little bit on the harness, which could scare them initially, before you start making forays that are further from home, or you decide to, take them to the park or anything like that. And for some cats, you're only going to be walking them around in your yard, and that's really all they want to do. Cats are very attached to their territory, and most cats don't like to leave it at all. So if you're doing harness training with a cat, it may not be with the idea in mind that you're going to take them out in the world and other places. For most cats, they really just want to be around their territory that's going to be around your house, maybe a few blocks around your house. They don't really need to go further than that. So again, a little different from the dog situation for most cats, although there are exceptions out there, and you probably have seen them on YouTube or Instagram out adventuring in the world. That is not most cats. So just be ready for your cat to not necessarily be up for all of that. So other important enrichment for kitties that are staying indoors is exercise and play. So you want to make sure that you have semi-scheduled playtime for your cat, where you're doing interactive play. We don't want to start ignoring our cat's need for play, especially as they get older, and they can be a little bit harder to motivate to play. It doesn't mean they don't want to play. It just means they need more world building and storytelling to get them excited about play. They still need to play regularly. So you want to make sure that that is built into your day. And it doesn't have to be, the same time every day. But your cat may come to expect it at a certain time of day. And that may be one of those play times. And then the other one is kind of whenever kitty seems to be interested in play. And that it may just be 5 minutes, it may be 10 or 15, depending on how active your cat is. So if you have a 14-year-old kitty like mine, he's kind of tired after about 5 minutes of playing. But he really enjoys those 5 minutes of playing. So we want to make sure to have a few of those scheduled through the day. And we talked before about learning your cat's play style. So you want to make sure that you get to know your cat's play style and try to offer that type of play that gets him the most excited and rambunctious. Sometimes you have to kind of work at it and get them excited. And when you see a little spark of something, okay, what did I just do that they seemed really interested in? And I'm going to build on that to get my cat more excited about playing. Some cats like a laser pointer, but I do want to add a little caution that the laser pointer can be frustrating for some cats because they can never catch it. So if you have a cat who's really excited about the laser pointer, when they start getting a little tired, or when you're starting to get a little tired, throw them a treat like at the laser pointer and let them catch the treat, and they'll be like, "Oh my God, I caught the laser!" So make sure that they get that reward of making contact with the thing that they've been chasing. So always end a laser play session with a treat or some other toy that they can grab and play with. Catnip, I think we mentioned earlier, but that's another fun enrichment for any kitty, but certainly for indoor cats, having a little bout of catnip playtime, maybe once a week. We don't want to do it much more often than that because they'll have less sensitivity to it. But certainly catnip or silver vine that we talked about earlier is also fun stuff for indoor cat. Another great item that a lot of cats actually really enjoy and that can provide some amazing exercise for indoor cats is a treadmill. So you may have seen some of these, they're kind of like a giant hamster wheel. You may have seen some kitties running on these on the interwebs. So there are a few different models of treadmills that are made for cats. I would avoid getting one that has an open spoke sort of design, like a sort of almost like a bicycle wheel, because I worry about little feet or legs getting trapped in those when they're really running at high speed. So there are several models that are made with a solid side, and then the running surface is a little bit grippy, kind of a foam sort of surface. So for safety, that's something to look for. And then as far as introducing your cat, of course, again, you want to take it in little baby steps and kind of let them investigate, give them treats and other encouragement, and start wiggling a little toy up in the treadmill and get them to maybe kind of chase the toy. And once they get used to the feeling of it moving, a lot of cats will start investigating it more on their own. And especially with really young, very active cats, sometimes they'll go in there and just run. And it's wonderful exercise for a cat that's indoors, that doesn't have the space to get out and just run around. And if you have one of those kitties who's very young and active in keeping you awake at night, it's an ideal situation to be able to get them into the treadmill kind of last thing at night and encourage them to do a good workout session so they're tuckered out and hopefully will let you sleep. So we've covered the major resources and enrichment stuff for indoor cats. That we're going to talk a little bit more about some of that stuff in other sessions, and a little bit more at the end of this talk when we go over some other cat behavior stuff. So I will have a little bit more to say on this. I want to talk now about safety. We've all heard about curiosity in cats, and unfortunately, that's true. Curiosity can lead to a cat's demise, unfortunately. So we do want to be careful that we're covering for the major exposure risks for cats around our homes. So one of those, particularly for young cats, is foreign body ingestion. So if you have a kitty playing with a small enough toy that they might be able to swallow that, or string, we want to be very careful that we're watching what they're doing. If you think that your cat might swallow any of the toy that they're playing with, and especially string, get it away from them. And don't ever leave string out where a cat can get at it without supervision. So if you have toys that are on a string, or you're playing with a string, or they're batting at your dental floss and they might get it out of your trash can, make sure that you're making it impossible for them to access that stuff, because cats can swallow that stuff and it can get stuck in part of the GI tract. And string in particular will stick on one spot and start acting like a little slicer when the intestine is trying to move. Other foreign bodies like hair ties. This is a big one for cats. They love playing with hair ties and then swallowing them. Those things expand in the stomach and get stuck in the intestine, and they're just horrible. So make sure if you've got hair ties around the house that you're keeping them away from the cat. Don't ever leave one sitting on a table or anywhere that a cat might get at them. If you see a cat playing with a hair tie, watch them very closely, and if they get it in their mouth and they're starting to chew on it, take it away right away. And ideally, just take it away right away and replace it with a better toy that they're not going to be able to swallow. Some cats are just going to be sort of prone to that kind of behavior, and most cats are not. But thankfully, most cats don't do that, but some cats do. So you definitely want to be keeping an eye out for that, because if they do ingest something that they cannot get out the other end safely, they're going to need emergency surgery, and that's not fun for anyone. Cats also love to investigate any kind of box, crevice, hole, anything. So be sure that you know where your cat is when you're doing laundry. They can get into washers and dryers. They can be, especially little itty bitty kitties, can be in your laundry. You may not realize it. So make sure that you're paying attention to where your cat is. If you're packing a box to send out, if you are having any kind of construction done and you've got a hole in the wall, make sure that your cat doesn't have access to that stuff. Cats have been known to get into these kind of situations, and it's very dangerous for them. So do make sure, if you don't know where your cat is and there is a potential hazard like that around, make sure the cat's not in there. Also make sure if you're going to be out of town, you have a pet sitter, that they know to not have doors closed, that a cat might get trapped in a room, that they're making sure that they have eyes on the cat at least once a day, that sort of thing. So, even just being trapped in a room can be very dangerous for a cat. So make sure that you know your cat has access to all of the resources that they need, and that they're not getting trapped in a box or a hole in the wall or anything like that. And then we've got household toxins. The absolute primary number one worst household toxin is lilies. So any flower in the lily family or the daylilies, these are so toxic to cats. Even a very small amount of just the pollen on their feet that they lick up when they're grooming can be fatal within days. So don't have lilies in your house if you're going to have a cat. Just don't do it. Train anyone who might get you flowers to recognize any of the lilies. And you can find a complete list of the species on the ASPCA website. They have a list of household toxins. So you can just go to aspca.org and do a search for toxins, or find it in their menu bar. They have a whole list of toxic plants in particular. Lilies are absolutely the primary. There are lots of other house plants that can be toxic to cats, but most of them are relatively minor. There are a couple like azaleas that could cause some pretty significant gastrointestinal distress that may need to be treated, but they're going to be treatable. With lily toxicity, if you don't get it right away, even if you hospitalize them, they may not make it. If you get it right away and you hospitalize them, and it's not going to be cheap, but if they've ingested lilies and you see them do it and you get them to the vet within a couple of hours and you get them started on treatment, they probably will be okay. But if they ate some lilies 2 days ago and now they're vomiting and acting lethargic, their chances are maybe 50-50 after being in the hospital for several days. So just don't do it. So other plants like azaleas that can be somewhat toxic, we're going to be able to treat that kitty and they're going to be okay as long as we get them treated. Lots of other plants that we hear of as being toxic, like the one that most people know, which is interesting. Most of us don't know about lilies, but most people are familiar with the poinsettia as a toxic plant. And poinsettias are actually pretty minor. So they will certainly cause irritation in the mouth that could make a cat drool, kind of foam at the mouth. And that could be very irritating. You can just rinse that out of their mouth and usually they'll be fine. If they do swallow some poinsettia, they're probably going to have, again, GI upset, gastrointestinal upset that may need to be treated, or it may be self-limiting. So most of those other household plants are not as bad. Their azaleas, again, can be cardiotoxic, so they can cause a heart issue, but it's pretty rare that we actually have that occur. So there are some other plants that could be cardiotoxic, which is, causing heart problems, or neurotoxic, causing neurologic symptoms, but those are quite rare. And in most cases, they have to eat a pretty large dose. So very different from lilies, where even a tiny, tiny exposure can be lethal. Most of the other plants are kind of mild to moderate. But if you're getting cats and you love houseplants, you again can look up that toxic plant list on the ASPCA website for a pretty good idea of which plants are safe to have in the house. Spider plants are a great one. My cats eat my spider plants all the time, and they are fine. So spider plants are a good, safe one to have around. And there are lots and lots of safe houseplants. So don't feel like you can't have houseplants if you have cats, because plants are great too. So some foods that a lot of people aren't aware are toxic to cats are onions and garlic. So if you're offering any people food, a little piece of meat or something from your plate, make sure that it was not cooked with onions or garlic. If you've got something that's in gravy that had onions or garlic in it, don't let your cat have access to that. That can make them pretty sick. And that it causes problems with the blood cells that you're going to have to take them to the vet to get them treated if they've gotten into that. So just avoid that. If you're offering a little bit of baby food, sometimes we'll recommend chicken or turkey baby food for cats that aren't feeling well. You do want to make sure that it's the kind of primary, the youngest baby stuff that doesn't have any onions or garlic in the ingredients. So just be careful with that. A couple of other very serious toxins that potentially cats could have exposure to. One is antifreeze. That is as bad as lilies. That is super fatal if they lick it up. Now, most antifreeze these days has a bittering agent in it, but I don't think all of them do. So you do want to be careful. It has a taste that for some reason cats like, and they will drink it. So if you're using antifreeze in your garage, and there's a leak anywhere, make sure that you clean that up, or your cat has zero access to the garage. Or if you have a cat that goes outdoors and might have exposure to that out in a driveway, be super, super careful that you clean any of that up. It's very deadly to cats. Household medications that we might be taking potentially also can be very, very bad for cats. Ibuprofen and Tylenol in particular can be deadly for cats. So don't ever give a medication to your cat that you haven't asked your vet if it's safe and what dose is safe. So it might be something that's totally safe and fine for you, but cats are not little humans. Cats are very special alien creatures. Their metabolism is very different from ours, so they cannot metabolize those drugs in a safe way. They're extremely toxic. And there are other household medications that prescription medications or over-the-counter that may be toxic to cats as well, but those two are seriously deadly and ubiquitous in American households, so don't be tempted to give that to your cat. If you think you have a cat who's painful, definitely contact your vet. Okay, we're going to move on to some cat health. So I'm going to talk first a little bit about monitoring basic health at home. So we mentioned earlier litter boxes as being kind of one of your primary sentinels to your cat's overall health. And the reason I say that is knowing what is coming out of your cat can tell you a lot about how well they're doing. So I would consider using a litter box monitor, or if you're using one of the automatic scooping type boxes, get one that includes the monitoring. Or make sure that you're doing the scooping yourself. So a cat should be producing urine and stools regularly in healthy amounts. So you first want to get familiar with your cat's daily routine and what's kind of normal for them. And if it's a young, healthy cat overall, you should have a pretty good idea of how frequently they're urinating and how frequently they're having a bowel movement. So most young, healthy cats will have a bowel movement once to twice a day. In some older cats, it might become a little bit less frequent. You don't want them to go more than 48 hours. I would like for every cat to have a bowel movement every 24 hours at least. Some older cats will go 48 hours and they're doing otherwise fine. They're eating well. They're not having vomiting. They're active. If it's every 48 hours and they're not straining, that's probably okay. But you want to be kind of shooting for every 24 hours. So we should be having urination. Usually for most cats, it's going to be 1 to 3 times a day. And as long as that's in a good amount, so if you're using a clumping litter and you're getting a ball of urine, that's about the size of a lemon to an orange. That's a good size. That's what we're looking for. So if it's less frequent, it's going to be larger. If they're doing it a little bit more frequently, it'll be smaller amount. As long as it's in that range, that's pretty good. Now, if you have a noticeable increase in the amount of urine that's being produced, where you're like, wow, this is like a lake all of a sudden, or over the last few weeks, I've been noticing there's like 5 orange-sized balls in the litter box on a regular basis. That's not normal, and that's your first cue. Something has gone wrong, and we need to go to the vet. And that's something, there are multiple things that can cause a cat to suddenly start producing more urine. So testing will need to be done in order to figure out what it is. But there is something wrong if your cat is suddenly producing a lot more urine. Likewise, a lack of urine production can be an emergency. So if you have a cat, first you might notice they're going in and out of the box and not producing very much, or you're noticing, okay, there are like 5 or 6 or 7 little small bits of urine, or the cat is going in and out, and only producing a tiny amount. That's also not good. And that can be a more urgent problem than the producing a large amount of urine. And now, especially if you have a cat who's going into the box multiple times and not producing anything, if there's no urine in a 24-hour period, and the cat is acting like they need to go to the vet now, especially if it's a male cat. And if you listen to episode 1, you already heard some of that. So that is a really serious issue. So if you go and you're skipping the box and you're like, whoa, there's no urine in here, first go look and see, oh my gosh, did they maybe go out of the box for some reason? But check on your cat. If they're acting weird at all and there's no urine in the box, that is a problem. Every once in a while, we might have a cat go longer than a day without producing urine because maybe something happened and they got scared and they were hiding for several hours and they didn't have their normal routine. As long as they're acting completely normal and they're not going in and out of the box or squatting and looking like they're straining, then it may be okay. You may give them a little bit longer than 24 hours, but in general, you don't want to go much longer than that. And especially if you are seeing any signs that they're trying to go and they're not being successful. So the increased frequency of visits is often with a decreased amount of production. That can be a real emergency, but you may also see an increased frequency of visits and also a large amount of urine. That is also an indication that something is wrong. Changes in stool consistency also can be an issue. So of course, if you're seeing diarrhea and it's not going away within a day, oh boy, we've got an issue. So that's an important thing to watch for in the box too. And often with a softening of the stool, you also will see more frequent bowel movements. And that can mean that, your kitty is struggling with an infection or a reaction to a food or something like that. Sometimes it can be stress induced. But if that's just a couple of bowel movements that are kind of soft or gooey, not necessarily a big problem if the cat's otherwise acting normally, but if you're seeing, okay, now we're going 2 days with nasty, watery diarrhea, we need to go to the vet. And if you're noticing that your cat's stool is getting more dry, or it's hard, or it's little balls instead of little logs, that is an indicator of constipation. So that's also important to look at. So any change in that department can be an indicator that something has gone wrong. And also, if they have started going outside of the box, whether that's urinating or defecating, this is usually an indicator something is wrong. So like we talked about earlier, some cats will do that because they have an aversion to the litter that's being used, or it could be the box or the location of the box. If it's in a laundry room and the machine is going on all of a sudden, it's scaring them, or it's in a high traffic area of the house. Any of those things also could be an issue. So those are things to think about too. But if you have an animal that's been using the box normally and then starts going out of the box, we need to go to the vet. So again, get familiar with your cat's daily routine and also their overall activity level. If you're noticing a change in their general routine or their overall activity, that can help you identify discomfort, illness. Again, see episode 1. If there's a change in their regular routine, that can indicate that something is going wrong with their health. So that's kind of your general monitoring. Oh, food and water intake as well. Sorry. This is your other major sentinel. If you have a cat who's suddenly becoming very picky, who didn't used to be, if they're vomiting or regurgitating frequently, or if they stop eating, that's not good. Your food and water intake are indicators of health as well. If you notice a sudden real increase in how much they're drinking, that could signal a kidney problem, diabetes, all kinds of other illnesses can come with a sudden change in how much water they're drinking. So we're going to move on from monitoring to maintenance of health. So aside from, providing all of their resources, good quality food and fresh, clean dishes and all that good stuff, a freshly scooped litter box and everything, there's some other basic health maintenance stuff that you can take care of at home. So if you have a long-haired cat, you are going to need to do regular grooming. So you do want to get any long-haired cat used to being brushed as soon as possible, especially around their little armpits and the tummy. So a lot of long-haired cats don't like it if they weren't introduced to brushing pretty young. So you may need to do a little bit of work to very slowly introduce an adult cat to being brushed. Give them treats, give them pets, whatever they really love. You want to give as a reward when you're doing some grooming if they don't love the grooming. Some cats love being brushed, and that's ideal. But you definitely want to make sure that you're brushing long-haired cats regularly, so at least a couple of times a week. And depending on the coat and how long and fine it is, you may need to brush them every day. So definitely get them used to that and make it so it's a pleasant and non-stressful kind of bonding experience for you. Hopefully it's just, an extension of being petted and loved on, and they're purring and enjoying the whole thing. But if you have a long-haired, fluffy kitty that is getting mats forming, you want to try to get those out as quickly as possible. The more matted they get, the more that hair is pulling tightly on their skin. It's very uncomfortable and can become quite painful and can lead to dermatitis. So I have had kitties who have come in and had to get a lion cut, meaning we're trimming off the hair completely from their whole body, except for the head and tail, the end of the tail. And I've had them come in with that hair coming off all in one piece. And that is not good. If you have a kitty that is that badly matted, you're not taking adequate care of their coat, and you need to. That's really uncomfortable for them. And when we pull off, we're clipping the hair very carefully, and we pull off that hair in a chunk, those cats have red, irritated, icky skin. They're not comfortable. It's really doing damage to their skin. So don't let your long-haired kitties get like that. You want to make sure that you are grooming them regularly. And if they are starting to get matted and they won't let you take care of their mats, you want to enlist a groomer or your vet. Some vets won't do grooming stuff, but most vets will do at least a little bit of a hack job. It might not be pretty, but we'll get the mats out. You also want to maintain their nails. We did talk about the scratching post, which is an important part of nail care. You also probably are going to need to do some nail trimming for your kitties. Their nails will tend to grow longer if they're indoors and they're not being exposed to kind of a variety of surfaces. If they're indoors kind of on carpet or wood floors, they're not going to be wearing down their nails very much. So doing regular nail trimming at home is excellent. So if you can learn how to do that, it's really pretty easy. And most cats, especially if you, again, use positive reinforcement and give them treats and love and tell them how great they are while you're trimming their nails. You want to check nails about every 3 to 6 weeks. It depends on the cat, how active they are and that sort of thing. And get them trimmed as soon as they're looking like they're pretty long and scary. Or if you're hearing your cat get a nail stuck in the carpet, that is an alert to you that you need to trim their nails. Older cats in particular, or cats that have any kind of mobility issue, or they're not able to sharpen their claws for some reason, they are at risk of having those nails ingrow and pierce the toe pad, and that's quite painful. I see that in senior cats quite often. So especially with your older kitties or, in any way debilitated kitties, you want to be checking their nails at least every 3 weeks and make sure that you're comfortable doing trimming, or you have someone who will come and trim nails for you, because we don't want them to be getting ingrown, because they won't tell you. They may not walk normally and they may be licking at their feet a lot, but this is a silent, horrible injury that most cats will not tell you about. Toothbrushing is also a really helpful part of their regular daily health routine that most of us are not doing because most cats are not super thrilled about it. But if you start them young, or or if you do a great job of positive reinforcement training, you can get cats used to having their teeth brushed. You do want to use a toothbrush that is designed for cats. You can get some that are made on a little finger brush kind of thing. Those are pretty easy to manipulate and, get into the cat's mouth more easily than a brush that has like a regular handle on it. The bristles are very soft. This is like a pediatric type toothbrush, and it's a very small head that can fit in a cat's mouth. The toothpastes that are made specifically for cats are safe to swallow, and they're usually flavored with chicken or fish or something like that. Most cats are not super fond of the taste of mint, so don't try that. Most of them will not like it. But the flavored toothbrushes can make the whole toothbrushing experience go better. And ideally, what you want to get to is taking it in little baby steps, training the cat to get used to it. You want to get to a point where you can brush their whole mouth in 2 minutes or less. So that it's not a stressful experience for any of you. And then you get them maybe drink a little bit of water and have a treat so that they're getting rewarded for it every single time you do it. And then we already talked about some regular exercise and playtime. That's important for mental stimulation. It's also important for weight management. We do want to keep our cats at a healthy body weight, and your vet can help you to determine a healthy body weight. You also can look up an image online of the cat body weight scale, and that can help you to be kind of judging body condition at home. Weights will vary in healthy cats between about 5 or 6 pounds on the very low end of a very petite little kitty to, upwards of 15, 16, sometimes a little higher for large cats like a Maine Coon. And my cat is meowing and scratching at my door because he wants to be part of the show today. Cats must be heard, after all. So continuing on with a little bit of health maintenance at home, just in general, we want to make sure that we're keeping our cats' resources and the cats themselves clean and hygienically sound, especially if you do have a cat who is very overweight. Obese cats do tend to have trouble grooming, especially their nether regions. So the anal area, the reproductive parts, these can be very difficult for them to keep clean. And a lot of cats will have soiling in that area that can lead to urinary tract infections and skin infections and irritation. So especially for our obese kitties, we want to make sure that we're keeping them clean. And that might mean giving them a little bit of a rear end bath once a week and using wipes, maybe even daily, depending on the cat. So you can use wipes that are made for pets, for kind of the diaper zone. Just make sure that you're wiping so either the vaginal opening or the penis upwards towards the anal area. We don't ever want to wipe from the anal area down. So make sure, because then we can track fecal material and bacteria down into those areas, and we're increasing the risk for a urinary tract infection. So always wipe upwards if you're needing to help keep that area clean. And you may notice if you have a very overweight cat that their coat can be kind of flaky and greasy. Part of that is because they can't reach as well around to groom, so you may need to do more brushing with them to help keep them cleaner. And they may benefit from having a bath with like an anti-seborrhea shampoo. So some cats will do well with that, but if you're doing bathing, you want to introduce it kind of slowly and gently and use nice, warm, comfortably warm water. And be sure to rinse them very thoroughly if you are doing a bath. Now, obese cats also, their skin and coat can be in poorer shape because fat cells cause inflammation. So there's a lot of cell signaling going on from fat cells. They're not just storing fat. They do, unfortunately, increase inflammation in the body. And some of that is going to show up in their skin and coat. So working on weight management will help with that. And again, we'll talk about that, weight management and obesity, in a later episode. But, for those kitties, for now, just make sure that we're paying extra special attention to their general hygiene. If you have a cat who just has kind of a lackluster coat, they're getting a lot of matting, even a short-haired cat. If they don't smell good, if they smell kind of icky, something's probably not right with their health. And we want to get them checked out by the vet, because cats that are healthy and active should have a glossy, soft coat. and smell great. I think cats smell amazing. So you should want to smell your cat. If your cat coming up to you makes you go, ooh, something's probably wrong. And we want to make sure that we're managing that and making sure that they are comfortable and healthy as possible. So coat hygiene, all of that kind of stuff also are indicators of their health. And we want to make sure that we're helping to maintain that for them. And another part of health maintenance is stress management. So cats, like I mentioned, are prey species, and they can get very nervous and scared in certain situations. They need to feel safe. And they do need a sense of kind of routine and sort of maintenance of their territory. So we do want to make sure that we're providing the enrichment that I mentioned, that we're looking after their safety, and that we're managing stress. So that can be stress from interactions with people in the house, with other cats in the house, with other animals in the house, or with animals that are outside of the house, construction going on across the street, people visiting your home. All of these things can lead to stress for your cats. Having poor access to resources, or their resources being in a location that isn't comfortable for them. So we want to make sure that we're kind of looking from a cat's eye view at that kind of stuff. If you have a cat that's hiding a lot, they don't like to come out during the day. They're only coming out at night when everybody's asleep. That can be an indicator that they're under a lot of stress and they're scared and nervous. So, looking at their environment and the enrichment situation and their access to safe zones and all that kind of stuff is really important when we have a cat that's showing those kind of signs. Sometimes cats that have stress can have inflammation in the body secondary to stress. And that often is in the bladder. And so we will see cats with urinary tract symptoms that are secondary to stress. And it's not entirely behavioral. In some cats, urinating out of the box is entirely behavioral, but in most cats, it's not. And in those cats that have a particular type of stress response, they actually will have inflammation in the bladder that is secondary to stress. It causes them pain. So we do want to make sure that we are managing their stress however we can. And all of that stuff that I talked about up to this point plays into that. How to introduce them to other cats and manage interactions between cats, and providing safe zones and all of that kind of stuff is going to contribute to managing stress levels. Okay, I want to encourage you, if you're bringing a new cat home, or if you've moved to a new area, or if you haven't been to the vet with your cat within a year, to set up an appointment with your vet. So definitely an important thing to do with a new cat coming into your home to make sure that you're set up for success with that new cat. And moving to a new area, just getting established with a new vet. And if you haven't been to the vet for an annual checkup with your kitty, you definitely want to get that done. Again, see episode 1. So you want to be planning to talk over any pre-existing health conditions that the cat has. So if you're adopting a cat from a shelter or someone else, try to get as many medical records as you can, as we talked about earlier. And if you're moving from one vet to a new vet, make sure that you get their medical records sent over to your new vet before your visit. Can't emphasize that enough. It is so helpful for a vet who's seeing a cat with a medical history to have their medical history available before the visit to look at and be ready for, so that we can be prepared to answer your questions as well as possible and to plan any follow-up or regular management for that kitty, and so that you can learn what to expect if you have a new cat with a health condition that you haven't encountered before. Be sure to bring a list of any medications that your cat is already on and a list of any specific questions you have, so you don't have to try to think of that stuff on the fly, especially with medications. If they're on a bunch of meds, you might want to just take pictures of the labels for your vet so that they'll have all the information that you need, because what your vet is going to need to know is not just the name of the medication, but also the strength of the either tablet or liquid in milligrams or milligrams per milliliter, and the dose that your cat is getting. So whether that's a half tab or a 0.3 milliliters or whatever it is, all of that is important for your new vet to know, so that they can be evaluating the medication plan for your pet. Something to ask for with your vet if you don't know how to trim kitty nails is to do a nail trim demo. And usually one of the vet techs or assistants would do that with you and help you learn how and be comfortable doing nail trims for your cats at home. You'll also want to talk with your vet about viral testing and vaccines for your cat, of course. So viral testing is in general, when we're talking about that, with a new cat that's entering the home or with a cat that we don't know the status on, we're talking about feline leukemia virus and feline immunodeficiency virus, or FIV. This is similar to HIV in people. Both of these viruses cause immunosuppression, and they can be carried lifetime in the cat. So some cats will actually clear these viruses after getting infected. Some cats will get very ill and can die from these viruses early in infection. But in the majority of cats that get infected, they will carry the virus lifelong and can become ill over time. So it will basically be dormant for many years, and you may not be aware that your cat has it. And then later in life, they start getting sick with some issues and become immunosuppressed and can develop cancer and all kinds of secondary infections because of these viruses. So in any cat that we don't know the status, I highly recommend that you have the cat tested. So if you've just adopted a cat, or if your cat's just never been tested before, it's a good idea to get tested along with their regular basic lab work. And in an adult cat that you're adopting, or an adult cat that just hasn't had lab work in a couple of years, or less than that if it's a senior cat, regular basic screening lab work that's looking at organ function and that sort of thing is really important. So I recommend doing that as well. Core vaccines for cats are pretty simple, a little bit more simple than in dogs, which is kind of nice. Rabies vaccine, absolutely recommended for absolutely every cat. And yes, even your indoor-only cats, especially if you live in an area with bats. Bats are one of the biggest carriers of rabies in the U.S., especially on the West Coast. East Coast skunks and raccoons are a bigger threat, but bats are big-time carriers of rabies, and they can squeeze into the tiniest little crack in a door or window and get into your house. They can get in through attic spaces and that sort of thing. I have known many people who have gotten a bat in their house, much to their surprise. It's usually your cat who tells you the bat is in your house. So an indoor cat that notices a bat flying around or freaking out in the house because it's trapped in the house, that cat is going to investigate that bat, and that's a great way for an indoor cat to get infected with rabies. And if they are not vaccinated, rabies is 100% fatal. The vaccines are excellent, very, very protective. So do make sure that even your indoor cat is vaccinated against rabies. Most states have some legal requirement for rabies vaccination as well. So that also applies to indoor cats. So if your state does require a regular rabies vaccine, your indoor cat does need to have it for that reason as well. There is a combo vaccine that is usually referred to as FVRCP. Some people will call it the upper respiratory combo. Some will call it the distemper combo. It's not for distemper. That is a totally different virus, but somehow it got that nickname. The FVRCP stands for feline viral rhinotracheitis, calicivirus, and panleukopenia virus. The very heavy first part of that feline viral rhinotracheitis is herpes virus. Feline only, don't worry, it's not transmissible to people. It's a different herpes virus, but similar, and causes upper respiratory infection and eye ulcers, and sometimes ulcers in other places in cats. Calicivirus causes very similar symptoms to herpes virus. Panleukopenia virus causes depression of multiple white blood cell lines, and it also can cause very severe GI tract disease. Can be fatal in kittens, usually is not fatal in adult cats, but can make them quite sick. And if an adult female cat is pregnant when infected, depending on the stage of pregnancy, it can cause a defect in the kittens that leads to cerebellar hypoplasia, which you may have heard of. CH kitties who are wobbly for life. They don't have normal balance. So these are not as nasty, serious, horrible viruses as rabies, but they do cause significant impact on quality of life and can be long-term. Herpes in particular is forever. So once a cat gets infected with herpes virus, they don't clear it, although it may go dormant for a very long period period of time. And some cats won't ever have another outbreak, but other cats will have chronic symptoms, and other cats still will have the occasional nasty outbreak. So we do want to keep our kitties protected against these, and I do recommend these for indoor kitties as well. This is typically under vaccine guidelines for all cats. This is recommended even for indoor cats, partly because we can carry these viruses on ourselves. So if you're out in the neighborhood and a cute little cat approaches you and you love cats, so you interact with this cat and give them some cuddles, you may not realize that they are shedding virus. And then you go home to your cat, think nothing of it, and your cat sniffs you over and checks out the smell of that other cat, and you give them some pets, and now you've just infected them. So unfortunately, that is a risk. Those viruses can live on us for many hours, on our clothes and skin. So do protect your indoor cats as well as your outdoor cats. Outdoor cats obviously are at high risk for exposure to all of these viruses, so we want to make sure that they're vaccinated. Now, both of these vaccines typically are given to kittens. The FVRCP combo vaccine is given in a series, typically 3 to 4 vaccines up until they reach at least 16 weeks of age, in order to cause the immune response that we need. The rabies vaccine is given after 12 weeks of age, depending on your state, but it is safe to give after 12 weeks of age. Some places still give it after 16 weeks of age, but it can be given at 12. And those will be 1-year vaccines in kittens. And then when they get boosted, there are 3-year vaccines available. So you do want to talk to your vet and make sure that they are using cat-safe vaccines. There are various different formulations of vaccines, and there are some specific ones that we use in cats that are meant to help minimize the risk of developing a vaccine-associated tumor later in life. These are extremely rare tumors, much more rare than the consequence of not being vaccinated. So the incidence of rabies or these other viral infections causing serious quality of life issues or potentially being lethal in cats, that possibility is much higher than a cat actually getting a vaccine-associated tumor. But they do exist, they do happen. But our newer vaccines that are non-adjuvanted vaccines are much, much safer for cats. We believe that the adjuvant is one of the primary triggers for causing those types of tumors to form later in life. Also, make sure that your vet hospital is vaccinating your cat on the legs and not on the shoulders. If they are still vaccinating on the back of the neck or over the shoulders, they're not keeping up with current recommendations and standards of care. Cats should be vaccinated as far down on the leg as possible. In the event that a tumor does happen, we can, this sounds terrible, but it's much better than the alternative. We can amputate a leg if cancer occurs in the leg as a consequence of a vaccine, and we can cure the cat of cancer. If we have vaccinated over the shoulders and a tumor happens in that place, it is almost impossible to fully remove it and not have it recur. And the type of tumor that does occur in reaction to a vaccine or other injection, it's not just vaccines. There can be a weird inflammatory reaction that cats get to an injection. If it occurs in the shoulder, the chances of treating it successfully are almost nothing. And so I bring up the vaccine-associated tumors because a lot of people have heard of them and find them very scary. And yes, they are scary, but they're less scary than rabies. Rabies, which can also be transmitted to any other mammal in contact with that cat. So I don't want people to be afraid of getting their cats vaccinated because they've read about or heard about these tumors. As I said, they are quite rare. And as long as your vet is keeping up with current standards of practice in feline medicine, they know to be using non-adjuvanted vaccines, to be vaccinating as infrequently as possible. So using the 3-year vaccines that are cat safe instead of vaccinating annually all the time. And vaccinating as far down on the leg as possible so that in the rare event that we do get a tumor forming, we have treatment options. So I want people to be aware of that so that you know what to expect. And I want you to know that the sequela of not vaccinating your cat, is more likely to be serious than the potential risk associated with vaccinating your cat. We vaccinate kitties all day, every day, and we rarely ever see serious problems in response to that. So moving on from those first two vaccines that are core vaccines for all cats, the other vaccine that is commonly needed is the feline leukemia vaccine. So we talked about the viral testing earlier for feline leukemia. So once your cat has been tested, if they are negative for feline leukemia, all kittens should be vaccinated with the two vaccine series for feline leukemia. And then if they are staying strictly indoors or the only outdoor access they'll have is on a harness or in a catio, and they don't have any potential direct exposure to unknown cats, then you don't need to continue a feline leukemia vaccine lifelong. For cats that are going to be going outdoors and potentially will have exposure to a cat of unknown viral status, you definitely want to make sure that they're vaccinated against feline leukemia. Now, unfortunately, we don't have a great vaccine for FIV. So that's the feline immunodeficiency virus. So cats that are going outdoors should be tested annually for FIV to find out if they are still clear, and hopefully they will remain clear if they're going outdoors and potentially getting into scuffles or other situations with other cats. But the FVRCP, rabies, and FELV, or feline leukemia, are the major core vaccines for cats. But like I said, for strictly indoor kitties, once they've had that initial set of vaccines as young cats, they don't need to continue being vaccinated because their risk is just low to zero. So lots more information that we could go over on vaccines and lots more learning to be done. But those are the basic major points that I really want people to know about vaccines. And I probably will do another episode sometime in the future on immune function and vaccination and how it all works and discussing vaccines in more detail. So stay tuned at some later time for that. You want to also talk to your vet about dental care. We did talk a little bit about regular toothbrushing. That is one of the best things that you can do to maintain dental health at home. But most cats are going to need dental cleaning under anesthesia at some point in their lives. And that varies a lot age-wise as to when they need their first dental. So some cats do have pretty significant dental disease from a very young age, and some of that can be genetically mediated, and some of that can be due to early exposure to certain viruses as kittens. And then other cats can be 12, 13 years old, and they look like they have perfect teeth. We don't know what the roots of the teeth look like unless we do get them under anesthesia, and we can take x-rays of the roots, just like when you and I go to the dentist and get our regular tooth cleaning and all that. So it is important to do, even in a cat who looks like they have perfect teeth on the surface. If they're getting up there in age, they're 10, 11, 12, and they've never had a dental procedure before, they probably do need one, even if on the surface, on an exam with a cat who is awake and maybe not really super excited about opening their mouth and having the vet look in there, they could use a dental cleaning and full exam and evaluation with x-rays and all of that. So do talk to your vet about dental care. Everybody needs it. It's part of our health. It's not for just having shiny white teeth. It's really about maintaining health because the mouth is affecting everything downstream. So, having a lot of bacterial load in the mouth, inflammation in the mouth, that will affect the cat system-wide. So it is something that needs to be taken care of. And your vet can help you decide when your cat is ready to have a full dental procedure and when they're good for regular just toothbrushing at home and perhaps dental treats and diets and lots of other options that we have for maintaining dental health. So if you have a kitty who is not spayed or neutered, we'll talk a little bit about spay and neuter. I know that there are in some communities, there's some debate over whether spaying and neutering is a good thing or a bad thing, what's the best age to do it, and that sort of thing. I feel like a lot of that debate is more in dogs than cats, but there is a little bit of that in cats. I will say if you are planning to have a strictly indoor cat, there is a much greater likelihood that they are going to spray in your house if they are intact meaning not spayed or neutered. Spraying is pretty hormonally mediated. That is a territorial kind of behavior that we will see in both males and females. It is certainly worse in males because I will tell you, a male cat that has testosterone in his system makes the most horrible smelling urine you have ever smelled in your entire life. You do not want that happening in your house. So if you have a male cat who is intact and you're planning to keep that cat indoors, you definitely are going to want to get him neutered for your own sense of well-being. So for that behavioral aspect, spaying and neutering is really helpful, typically before the animal reaches full maturity. So they can start doing the spraying. Some kitties will start doing it pretty young, but most of them will start it kind of after about 6 to 8 months of age. So if you get them before that time, you usually can prevent them from developing that behavior, and they don't tend to spray very much. Every cat's different. There's individual variation, but overall, the vast majority of cats will not start spraying if you have them spayed or neutered before about 8 months old. And you might need to go a little bit younger in males. So if you have a male kitten and you notice he's backing up against a wall and doing a tail shake, you want to get in there and get him neutered soon. So talking about benefits versus risks of spaying and neutering. So benefits, obviously there is the issue with overpopulation. And while we've made a lot of strides in the quality of our animal shelters across the country, and these are much happier places for cats to be stuck for a while than they were in the past. I know when I was a kid, the average animal shelter was called the Pound, and it was not a place that you wanted a cat to end up. And we had a lot of euthanasia of perfectly healthy cats and kittens just because there was nowhere for them to go. The shelter medicine community has made amazing advances in how shelters are run, how animals are housed. So we have worked really, really hard to try to minimize that euthanasia of healthy animals just because of a matter of space. So things are certainly better than they used to be, but there are still lots of kitties out there without homes. There are lots of feral cats, and this is something we don't want. We definitely want to spay and neuter cats that are going to have access to outdoors so that we're not making unplanned kittens. So cats can enter estrus or heat as early as 3 or 4 months old, and they can become pregnant as early as 4 months old. So that's not good for the cat. So if you do have a kitten who is unspayed and who has access to outdoors or manages to get outdoors because she's going crazy because of her hormones, she could become pregnant very young. And that is going to interrupt her growth because now her body is focused on making kittens. So that basically it's arrested development for that cat. So spaying is going to eliminate that risk. So spaying female kitties, as early as about 4 months. And in shelters, it is done much earlier because they're wanting to send these kitties home already spayed or neutered. And that we'll talk about the age at spay and neuter and how that affects cats. But that earlier spay does eliminate that risk. It eliminates the risk of unplanned kittens. It vastly decreases the risk for mammary cancers if we spay or neuter cats before 1 year old. We also, of course, are eliminating the risk of reproductive cancers, so other reproductive cancers, so of the uterus or the testicles or the ovaries. And it also is eliminating emergencies like pyometra, which is infection in the uterus that can be life-threatening very fast, and dystocia, which is a difficult labor or a baby stuck in the canal, which can, of course, have lethal consequences for both the kitten and the mother. And then we have that decrease in spraying and in certain aggressive behaviors if we spay and neuter relatively young. And those types of behavioral issues are one of the primary reasons that cats do get relinquished to shelters. So eliminating that problem by spaying and neutering at a younger age is definitely better than the alternative. So, and as far as the risks, we've heard a lot in recent years about musculoskeletal development and personality development and things like that when we are spaying and neutering very young. Most of that stuff has been in dogs. Studies that have been done in cats have shown no increased risk for long-term adverse health effects when they are sterilized very young. Perhaps there may be some increased risk for joint disease later in life, like as they get older, but they live longer. So spayed and neutered kitties, especially when they're living indoors, live a lot longer than cats that are out mating and fighting out in the great outdoors because they are intact. So it's hard to say at this point. We really don't have enough data to compare intact male and female cats with spayed and neutered female and male cats to know if we have a really increased risk of something like arthritis developing at a slightly early age, or just being more common in animals that might be spayed or neutered. There have been a couple of really interesting studies that I want to mention. One was almost 800 cats that showed a slightly delayed closure of the growth plates in the rear legs in male cats only. There was no known actual link to any significant risk. So the growth plate is where the bone is growing in a young cat. This was in cats that were spayed or neutered as kittens. So, and I don't have the exact age. I believe it was before 6 months of age. So that the growth plate where the bone is growing would continue to grow for a little bit longer before it fully mineralized and the cat was not growing any longer. So we don't know if that actually leads to any kind of a problem, though. So it was interesting. That was the only thing that they found in these kitties that were spayed and neutered younger. In another study of 799 cats, it was found that obesity, outdoor access, and a history of trauma could predispose cats to developing mobility changes associated with degenerative joint disease or arthritis, whereas neutering prior to 6 months of age actually appeared to decrease the risk. So we're talking about the joint disease this has been raised as an issue in dogs, where we may see more joint problems in dogs that are spayed or neutered young. It appears that it might be the opposite in cats. So that is really interesting information. In a smaller study of 84 cats, looking at urethral obstruction. So this is an obstruction of the urinary tract in male kitties, which is a very severe life-threatening condition that happens fast. It appears that intact cats had an earlier onset of symptoms, regardless of the age at neuter. So cats that were neutered young or cats that were neutered a little bit older actually had less likelihood of developing urethral obstruction by age compared to cats that were fully intact. So this, again, neutering appeared to have a protective effect on their urinary tract health. In another study of 35 cats, being indoors and neutering did lead to a little bit of an increase in body fat percentage, but also bone mineral density in cats that had an ideal body condition. So I say increased body fat percentage, but the cats were still at an ideal overall body condition, so they were not overweight. So what this means is that without that hormone input, these cats had a lower muscle mass to body fat ratio because they were spayed or neutered. This was the neutered cats. So interesting things to think about. In general, we do see the benefits for spay and neuter, even at a young age, under 6 months old, vastly outweigh the risks or downsides of spaying and neutering. So I do certainly recommend spaying and neutering cats at this point in time. There are some alternative surgeries that some places are doing. Again, this is being done more in dogs than in cats, and the situation in dogs is very different than in cats. Their social structure is so different. The way that they are affected by hormones may be quite different, by those reproductive hormones. And we really just don't have as many studies in cats as we do in dogs. Those studies that I just mentioned to you are really most of what I could find in the literature on the pros and cons of spaying and neutering cats, especially at a young age. So we do need more data. But overall, I will say we see cats living very long lives after having been spayed and neutered at a young age. We do have cats live into their late teens and early 20s regularly. So they do live a lot longer than the kitties that I used to know back in my youth when we didn't regularly spay and neuter and cats were going outdoors and getting into all kinds of trouble. We didn't see a lot of cats living to be that old. Certainly some, and I know I definitely have clients who have had elder kitties even decades and decades ago, which is wonderful. But I do recommend spay and neuter unless and until data comes out that lets us know that maybe there's a better way, which that would be great. So while we're at our vet visit, want to talk to your vet about medicating cats at home, or just have it in mind for if you need to. Now, if you do have a cat who is on medication or is going to be put on medication, make sure that you feel comfortable getting the medication into the cat. Cats are notorious for being difficult to give medication to. There are all kinds of fun cartoons out there in the world about the people becoming more injured than the cat ever was and trying to give medication to a cat that needed it. But it doesn't have to be like that. I promise you, there are lots of ways to get medications into a cat with minimal stress. If you have a new cat, especially a kitten, I highly recommend that you start giving a pilling treat as a treat now and give it on a regular basis so your cat is familiar with it and thinks of it as something super delicious. So there are various different brands of these soft treats that you can wrap around a pill and give to the cat so they don't know the pill is in there. So start it without any pills in it so your cat already thinks of it as a treat and they don't get it for the first time when they're getting medicated and maybe don't feel good. You want them to already associate these treats with something positive and great when they're feeling great so that they will more readily take it if they're not feeling as great. Mixing medication with food, that can work for certain medications, but it's not great for most medications for a couple of reasons. One is that a lot of medications are quite bitter and horrible tasting. And if you crush that pill up or put that liquid in the cat's food, it makes the food smell and taste horrible. And then now your cat doesn't want to eat their food. Not only do they not get the medication, but now they also have an aversion to the food that they used to eat readily, and they may not ever eat it again because it smelled or tasted disgusting that one time, which if you've ever had food poisoning, you'll get that. You'll understand that and sympathize with the cat. So in general, I don't recommend doing that, but there are a few medications that sometimes we will recommend doing that for that we know are pretty well tolerated by most cats. So something like Miralax, which is unflavored. It's a stool softener. A lot of older constipated kitties get Miralax mixed with their food and they tend to take it very well. Gabapentin powder from the capsule often is tolerated by a lot of cats, although some will not like it. So the other issue with mixing medication with food, if you do have a medication that the cats will tolerate the taste of, you want to make sure that you give it in only a small amount of food so that you can watch and make sure the cat eats the whole thing. Because it is important when you're giving a medication that the cat receives the entire dose. So if you mix it in their whole meal and then they only eat half of their food, you don't know how much medication they got. Another thing that's great to work on before you need it is familiarizing a cat with some kind of liquid treat via a syringe, or using squeeze-up treats, so like the True or Delectable treats. You can use those, and you can even roll up a pill pocket treat and put that in a squeeze-up and give it that way, just so that they're familiar with these things that they might need at some point in life. You can also use freeze-dried treats. So again, not raw, but cooked
freeze-dried meat treats like chicken. It's usually chicken or like a seafood treat that's going to be it's kind of a little dry, freeze-dried treat. And one of the cool things that you can do with this is you can throw a little gel cap. You can get empty gel caps at a drugstore and throw that in with the freeze-dried treats. And a lot of cats will eat all of it and not realize that they got the gel cap. So if you have a pill that you need to give your cat, you can break it into a couple pieces, put it inside the gel cap, and hide it with the freeze-dried treats. And a lot of this is my brother gives one of his kitties her meds this way, and she doesn't even know that she took the pill. She just sucks it all down. It's great. And then another thing that is an option for a lot of cats, especially cats that need to be on a long-term or even a lifelong medication, is compounded medication. So there are specific pharmacies that can make compounded medications. So these are the medication that is not in the commercial form. So where you might have an antibiotic or something that comes in a tablet or it comes in a liquid, but your cat absolutely will not take it in any of those forms, or it doesn't come in a dose that is appropriate for a cat. Your vet might send the prescription out to a compounding pharmacy to make it into a form like a flavored chewable tablet or something that your cat might tolerate. If it's a tablet and you just can't get tablets into the cat, you can have it made into a liquid and it might go better. It might not, depends on the cat. And some medications can actually be made into a transdermal gel that you rub on the inside of the cat's ear flap, so where there's just skin and no hair, and it actually is absorbed through the skin. And that is awesome and amazing for cats that are difficult to give oral medication to. But unfortunately, not every drug is absorbed well this way. So compounding pharmacies can make it, but that doesn't mean that the drug is absorbed well that way. So you do have to make sure that if you're getting a medication made that way, that you're aware of whether or not studies have been done that show that the drug is absorbed that way. And if there are no studies that show that, then you don't know for sure if the drug is going to work. It doesn't mean you can't try it, but it may not work. And that might not be because they're not responding to the drug. It might just be they're not absorbing enough drug because it doesn't move through the skin barrier well. Where certain medications do, and that's wonderful. And some of those are medications that we need to use in cats that aren't eating well or cats that need to be on lifelong medication. So do ask your vet about that option if you have a cat who is particularly difficult to medicate. But for any cat that you're going to need to give medication to, or that is just new to you and you just want to make sure that you can do it, I highly recommend that you learn to give a pill by hand. If you have a pretty sick cat who isn't going to take treats and that kind of stuff because they don't feel good, you may have to pop that pill in their mouth and get them to swallow it. And if you have good technique and you're comfortable doing it, it really isn't that hard, and you can do it with most cats. So, you can always ask your vet if they can do a pill demo with you, and I do this with clients all the time, and they are almost always incredibly surprised that it was so easy. So, and when they go home and they're struggling with their own cat, it probably isn't as easy as it was for me in the exam room, but they have the basics down and they can work on it, and it does get easier every time you do it. So, if you need to give oral medications to your cat and you're feeling nervous about it, don't just go home and think, okay, I'll figure it out. Get help from your vet. They should help you with that. They shouldn't be just sending you home going, okay, give your cat these meds. If you've never done it before and you aren't comfortable doing it, it can be very scary. People are afraid they're going to choke the cat. You're afraid to get bitten. It may just not get done because the cat freaks out. And we don't want that. I understand that you are concerned about your bond with your cat as well. And if we're stressing out our cat trying to shove pills down their mouth and they don't understand why, that can be damaging to our bond and our trust. And especially when we have a kitty who's not feeling well, we don't want to make them feel worse by stressing them out. So whatever we can do to make the medicating process go more easily, we want to do. So be sure to be clear with your vet about that. And typically your vet should be checking in with you. Someone from your vet's office should be checking in with you within a few days, or sooner if you have a really sick cat, just to make sure that things are going well. And if things aren't going well, be sure that you ask questions and get support. And ideally, if you try the first couple rounds of medication and it's not going well, you should call your vet and say, hey, I need some support and some help, or we need to come up with a different way to give medication. Because it's really important if your cat needs a medication that you're able to get the med into the cat. So again, highly, highly recommend starting to use those little soft treats, and maybe even put a crunchy treat inside the soft treat so your cat gets familiar with that kind of feeling of there's something in there, and just make it a positive experience and a low stress experience for them.
Okay, so let's get into some basic cat behavior stuff.
I first want to make the point that cats are quite intelligent, emotional, and even social creatures. Most of us know that cats are solitary hunters, and we think of them as sort of solitary animals, but they're not. They're also not social in quite the way that dogs are. So we have to manage them a little bit differently. But if you look at feral cats out in the world, they come in colonies. You always hear about feral cat colonies. You don't usually hear about that one feral cat. They do tend to congregate, and they don't spend all of their time together. They are solitary hunters. So when they're off, hunting for prey, they're doing that on their own. They don't do it in a group like we'll see with lions. That's one of the rare cats that hunts in a group like that. Most cats are even, across different species of cats, most of them are solitary hunters, but most of them also are somewhat social to some degree. And our little domestic house cats do like the company of other cats, but they do prefer to choose their company. So they don't have rigid social structures or clear alpha cats. A lot of people will think that they've identified the alpha cat in their house, but if you really watch closely, you'll see that is fluid. So in different situations, different cats might play the alpha role. So it depends on what situation they're in or what resources they're interacting over, which cat has a little bit of dominance to the other cat. So it can change, and it can also change throughout the cat's lives, and it can change if new cats come into that social situation. Interestingly, if you look at some of the videos that you can find online where people have put cameras on their outdoor cats' collars, you will almost always see that those cats go and visit other cats. It's pretty cool. And most people don't realize that you don't know where your cat's going throughout the day. You're at work, your cat's out running around, and you come home, kitty comes home. We don't have any idea what they've been doing all day, but a lot of them are going out and hanging out with other cats, which I think is just really awesome. So they do like to hang out with other cats, but when we are keeping cats strictly indoors with other cats, we need to make sure they have some freedom of choice and that they have access to solitude when they need it. So they do want to spend some time alone. They are built to spend some time alone. They're sort of like introverted people where we need our me time. Kitties need their me time. They need to be able to get away. So especially if you're introducing a new cat to the house who is very young and rambunctious, they may not be very respectful of an older cat's space. So you need to make sure that you're providing that by, keeping one cat in, one room for part of the day and then switching them out and that sort of thing, so that the older cat especially has a bit of time to themselves. Young kittens, they're used to being in a group and they're highly, highly active. So they can be around other kittens all day long and all night and be fine with that. But as they mature, they start to need some of that free time to themselves. So very shy kitties or minimally socialized kitties can be quite fearful, and they need more quiet. They need to develop a feeling of safety. So they need those hidey holes. They need those tall perches to help them feel more confident. And they need to take small steps to becoming more social and with lots of positive reinforcement. And I've mentioned that word positive reinforcement a lot. And I want to clarify a bit what that means since we're talking about behavior now. So positive and negative when we're talking about behavior modification and training don't mean good and bad. We tend to associate the words positive and negative with good and bad, especially when we're talking about positive reinforcement. That's not what it means. Positive means that it is something that you're adding to the situation. So in general, that's a reward of some kind. Negative, when we're talking, like if we're talking about negative reinforcement, negative means we're removing something from the situation. So like positive punishment is when you're adding a punishment to a situation. So you're That would be something like hitting an animal or squirting them with water, yelling at them. You're adding something to the situation. So it doesn't mean it's good punishment. It means you've added the thing that is punishment. And then the reinforcement part of that means the thing that you are doing is likely to cause the behavior to happen more, whereas a punishment is likely to reduce that behavior or reduce the likelihood that the behavior is going to occur again. So positive reinforcement means we're adding something to the situation in order to encourage that behavior to happen more. So that means, oh, you did this thing that I like, I'm going to give you a treat. So, oh, kitty, you came out into the room, this little shy kitty, I'm going to give you treats to encourage you to do that more so that you'll associate this with something enjoyable and happy. So that's what positive reinforcement is. We're giving them something in order to encourage them to do the thing that we want more. Okay. So for those very shy kitties who are not really used to being around lots of people, or maybe even any people, you just want to take it slowly, try to identify what is a positive reinforcer for that kitty, whether that's treats, or maybe just a little bit of petting on the face, or playing with a toy. If it's a younger cat, even when they're really shy, they might have a real good prey drive. So playing with toys and getting them excited about play might be the gateway into getting them feeling more comfortable with you. So if you have a little shy kitty who's hiding all the time or staying in one room and not wanting to venture out, that's really not good for them. We want to start working with that cat in tiny little baby steps, just really taking it slowly, being patient and encouraging them to start coming out and exploring and feeling comfortable. And if you have a really active, kind of noisy household and that sort of thing, it may not be a good situation for a kitty like that. They probably are going to be fearful, and it's going to make it hard to control the situation enough to allow them to start to feel more relaxed and comfortable. So, you may need to start with getting them to start coming out and exploring the house when people aren't home and that sort of thing, and have people come into them sort of one by one and introduce, kids who are maybe a little bit more raucous or noisy, very slowly and only with supervision to a kitty like that. So cats are very affectionate creatures in most cases. They have this weird reputation for being aloof, but I find them to be incredibly affectionate and cuddly, and we can see all over the internet, which was, of course, created in order to share videos of cats, that they are really affectionate, loving creatures. But it is important to pet your cat right and to recognize their body language and be attentive to their body language. Your cat will tell you what they like or what they don't like. So respond to that respectfully. Do pay attention. So if you have one of those kitties that you're petting them and all of a sudden they turn around and bite you, there's probably a reason that they're doing that. And they may have been giving you a signal that they wanted you to stop petting them or whatever it was that you were doing, and you may have missed that signal. So if you have a kitty who does that, start paying much closer attention when you're petting. And a lot of those cats, they're doing it when you're petting kind of idly and you're not really paying attention. So that's easy to do if your cat's sitting next to you or in your lap and you're petting while you're doing something else. It can be easy to be not petting them right because you're not fully paying attention. So you might be petting them in a weird rhythm where you stop for a minute and then you abruptly start again, and you don't even realize you're doing that because you're reading a book or you're surfing the internet or whatever. And for some cats, that is really irritating because it kind of startles them every time you touch them. Or you're resting your hand on them and your hand starts to get quite heavy because cats are pretty small. And so just your hand or your arm kind of resting on their body can get uncomfortably heavy, especially if it's a very small cat or an older cat that has some joint problems and you happen to be putting pressure, on their hip or somewhere that it's actually uncomfortable for them. So in some of those cases, we're causing the cat discomfort because we're petting them idly and we're not really paying attention to what we're doing. So better to just stop petting them if you're doing something else and you realize like, oh, I'm focused on this other thing. I'm just going to put my hand, next to the cat and we're just cuddling. Body language to look for if your cat starts doing a bit of an ear twitch, like they're turning their ear back, like they're almost listening to your hand when you're petting them, that might be the first signal that they're getting a little bit uncomfortable with what you're doing. Tail twitching, that is a big one. If they're enjoying being petted and they're relaxed and comfortable, their tail should not be twitching or thumping. If they're starting to do a bit of a tail twitch, they may be getting a little agitated. If they're sort of thunking the tail, they may actually be feeling more sort of aggressively playful, and they may be getting ready to like launch an attack because they're more interested in play than cuddle at this point. So watch that tail. The tail is often the very first sign. And in some of those cats that whip around and grab your hand when you're petting them, they were twitching their tail before they did that. So often there is that signal that they're giving you, and they're trying to give you some warning, and we're oblivious to the warning, and then they feel like they need to take the next step and be really obvious about what they're trying to tell you. And then they might actually bite you or swat at you. And by the way, if you do have a cat who does that, if you're petting and then they whip around and swat you, they may actually have discomfort. So do watch out for that. And if you have a cat who does that and you also occasionally see them like twitching their back skin or biting at the base of the tail, or they chase their tail or growl at their tail, definitely talk to your vet, because there is a kind of unusual sort of neurologic syndrome that can cause them to have weird pain for no reason. And sometimes petting them, especially along the lower half of the spine or around the base of the tail, can trigger that pain. So do be aware of that for kitties that do that. But the big thing is watch body language. A kitty that's walking around with their tail in the air, that's a happy cat. If the tail's in the air and also kinked over a little bit, that's a really happy cat. So that's good news. When you pet kitties, most cats will love to be petted around the head and face, and not every cat likes to be petted elsewhere, but most cats love to be petted around the face, under the chin, and most cats like to be kind of stroked along the back. And a lot of cats really love to be scratched right at the base of the tail, and they'll do that wonderful elevator butt where they go down in front, up in the back. It's a downward cat kind of position. And that's a cat that's really enjoying themselves. So totally fine to do that. And some cats do love a tummy rub, but you got to know your cat. Some cats will roll on their back to show you trust and comfort, and they're not necessarily inviting a tummy rub. So if they do roll on the back and you're like, ooh, all this wonderful tummy is exposed, and you go to pet the tummy and then they go, what are you doing? Don't ever do that again. That may be a cat who really never wants their tummy touched, although like we talked about, if it's a long-haired cat, you're going to have to get them used to having that brushed. But some cats really do love a tummy rub, and they will totally let you do it. So, go for it if they're liking it. I do want to mention the slow blink. A lot of people are familiar with the slow blink that a cat will give you, where they just slowly close their eyes while they're looking at you and then open, and they look nice and relaxed. A lot of people will do that back to cats, and cats will do it occasionally back to each other. There was actually a study done on the slow blink that showed that people who slow blinked at their cats usually would get a responding slow blink from the cat. And people who did that were more likely to be approached and investigated by a curious and friendly cat than people who did not. So there is communication going on there that is basically showing trust and approachability. So the slow blink, it does work. It's pretty cool. Cats also do have responses to human odors and behaviors. So there have been studies done that have shown cats are more likely to approach a person who is sad, especially if they know the person, and be solicitous of a person. And they are more likely to approach a person who is happy and cheerful and low stress than a person who is tense, stressed out, or angry. They will tend to avoid. So, which makes sense. They are paying attention to us, and they are paying attention to our body language, and possibly, odors that we produce that we may not even realize when we're, if we're crying or if we're angry and we're getting sweaty and worked up. They can sense that stuff a lot better than we can. And cats do form very strong bonds with people and other animals. And they do definitely form strong bonds with the people that they live with. Yes, your cats do love you. And I will find more studies on that when we do more in-depth animal behavior episodes in the future. So as far as your cats interacting with the other cats in the house, it's important to know if your cats tolerate each other or like each other or don't like each other. Because cats that are living together, especially strictly indoors, that don't like each other are being subject to quite a bit of stress. So if your cats are never hanging out near each other, if they're hissing or growling at each other, or they're actually getting into fights, we have a problem and we need to address that. We need to not just let that keep happening. And in particular, if you have one cat who is frequently chasing after the other cat and the other cat is hiding, that the cat that's doing the hiding and the running away is really stressed out, and that's not okay to just let that go. So if you have that happening in your household, you do want to address that. And sometimes that means we got to medicate one or both cats for a while. And I will say, in the right situation with the right supportive behaviors on our part, a medication like Prozac can be immensely helpful in softening those interactions and rewiring that relationship so that those cats can start to get along. It's not meant to be given forever. It's meant to be given for several months, up to maybe a year, and then tapered off in order to support some remodeling of behavior. So if you do have two cats that really aren't getting along, or multiple cats that aren't getting along, really, really we do need to address that, because we're throwing cats into a social group that they didn't choose for themselves, and we're just expecting them to get along. And you probably know how hard that can be if you've ever had to work with somebody that you didn't get along with, or you had a roommate that you didn't get along with. It's stressful, and we don't want to do that to our kitties. So we want to make sure that we're doing anything that we can to mitigate that. And if that means you have to buy a bigger house and have one floor for one cat and one floor for the other, then you just need to do that. I wish we could all do that. Now, cats who are tolerant of each other but aren't necessarily bonded to each other may sit near each other. Maybe they both sleep on the bed with you. They eat kind of at separate times from the same bowls, and they seem fine. They don't really interact, but they're not doing any hissing, growling, and nobody is staring anybody down. Especially some of the intimidation behaviors you might see are like one cat staring at the other while they eat, or staring at the other in the litter box. That's one of those things that's very stressful for the cat being stared at. It may not seem like there's anything aggressive going on when we look at that, but that is very intimidating for the other cat. So if you have one cat staring at the other, those cats are not actually tolerating each other. There's actually probably quite a bit of inter-cat stress going on. But if they're kind of hanging out near each other and they're in comfortable positions, they're probably pretty tolerant and they're okay. Now, if you have cats that are engaging in play, sometimes people aren't sure whether it's play or it's fighting. If there's hissing and growling and there's swatting and there's one cat running away and the other cat chasing, and the cat that runs away is just trying to get away and hide, that is fighting. That's not good. If the chaser and the chasee switch back and forth, and maybe there's some wow, 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 but there's not hissing and growling. If there's no hissing happening, but there's occasionally a little bit of a vocalization, and there's this back and forth kind of rough and tumble, they're probably playing. If we don't have, there's no hair standing on end, and we're not having one cat try to just get away, the cat that runs off then turns around and jumps on the other cat, this is probably play. And cats can play really rough. But as long as they're going back and forth, and when one of them is like, all right, I'm done, and tries to walk away, the other one should back off pretty quickly. They might try to get the other cat to engage again, but if the other cat says no, that they should both kind of go their separate ways, then that's fine. We're having playtime. That's totally normal for cats to get pretty rough with each other, and that's okay, as long as nobody seems like they're super uncomfortable. And in cats that are playing like that, we usually will see there is also some really good bonding behavior. So cats that are doing that type of play usually and ideally, you're also going to see them grooming each other and or sleeping really close together, so touching each other. They may be sleeping kind of in a pile or one head on top of the other's tummy, and they'll groom each other and that sort of thing. Those are bonded cats, and that is the ideal, of course. We want our cats who live together to absolutely adore each other. So that's the kind of relationship we're looking for. Now, they may not do the super high energy play, especially if they're older cats, and that's fine too. But if they're cuddling together, that's a really good sign. And if you have cats that regularly cuddle together and occasionally they engage in this really rough play and you're worried that they're fighting, well, they're probably playing. So that's a good thing. So we definitely want our kitties to have happy, healthy environments and minimal stress. Stress has a big effect on health. We know this from our own health. Chronic stress is really not good for us. Moments of stress are actually healthy and important. We need stress on our systems to grow, but when we have chronic stress, this isn't good. So we definitely want to make sure that we're not seeing those kinds of situations that can lead to urinary tract disease and irritable bowel syndrome, hiding, aggressive behavior, and in some cats, over-grooming. So if you have a cat who is constantly grooming, especially the tummy, to the point where they're bare, they don't have any fur left, that in some cats, that is a sign that they're dealing with stress or anxiety. So be on the lookout for that as well. And I also want to say, we talked about positive reinforcement a little bit. I do want you to avoid punishing your kitty. Yelling, swatting, throwing things, anything like that as a response to a behavior that you don't want is actually going to increase anxiety, increase fearful behavior. And in some cats, it will increase aggressive reactivity. So in particular, if you have a cat who's being a little aggressive, or they're playing rough with you, or they're, jumping out from the hallway and grabbing your legs, yelling at them, not going to make it better. If you have a cat who's peeing outside the litter box, definitely do not yell at them. I know it can be hard because it's really awful to find pee on your carpet or your clothes or your bed, but they're not doing it because they're trying to be nasty to you. They're doing it for some other reason, and we need to talk with our vet and find out what that reason might be and address it. Yelling at them, thunking them on the nose or swatting them, that is going to make it worse. So if your cat is urinating outside the litter box because of anxiety, and then we go and do something that makes them stressed out, we're going to make it worse. So if your kitty's doing something you don't like, it may be because there's a health problem. So do check with your vet. Now, for kind of basic sort of annoying bad behaviors, try to ignore the bad behavior unless you need to intervene in order to keep everybody safe or to avoid, a glass being knocked on the floor. We know kitties who like to knock stuff on the floor. If you need to intervene, try to do it quietly. Don't say anything to the cat. Try to just totally ignore them. If we respond to an annoying behavior in any way, that can be a positive reinforcer for the cat because they've got your attention. So try to ignore them when they do bad stuff. Just don't give them any attention. Intervene if you need to for safety reasons and that sort of thing. Direct your kitties to behaviors that you want, and then reward them, and build trust. The more that you show them what you want them to do by giving them a reward, as soon as they do it, like as quickly as possible. And if that's just a verbal reward, like, good kitty, you're so great. And then maybe a treat if you can fumble and get a treat, or playing with a toy or giving them pets, then, they will learn, okay, this is stuff that we want to do. And be aware that cats do respond to our emotional states, and they're more likely to be stressed, fearful, aggressive, if we are exhibiting unpleasant emotional states. So be happy for the sake of your cat. Thank you guys for bearing with me. This was a long one, and there are probably lots more long ones on the way because I've got a lot to say about animal health and wellness. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope that we'll start getting some feedback to help build future episodes for you so that you can help animals. And I want to thank you for tuning in today, and I want you to give your kitty cats hugs and kisses from me.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of Dr. A for Animals. This podcast is for educational purposes and does not substitute for specific medical advice for an individual animal or constitute the practice of veterinary medicine. No veterinary client-patient relationship is formed through listening to the podcast. If you have an animal in need of medical care, please see their veterinarian.